Okay, somebody's got to turn that one on. It wouldn't be earworms if I wasn't fucking up. All right, folks. Welcome to it. Welcome back to it if you've been here before and decided to stick with us. I'm Dr. Lawrence W. Moore of the Wayfarer Project, and tonight we have some magic for you. We have the Flute Wizard, gentleman by the name of Kyle Neidig, who is a master instrument builder, a professional ethnomusicologist, a performing musician, and a sound healer. If I hope I remember just about everything there. But we're going to have a lovely conversation tonight to see about the instruments he builds and the magic he makes out of it. Behind me here, if you notice, lying on the floor is Saruman. He got knocked out because the Flute Wizard basically sucked him out of Theoden and he landed on the floor. So we'll see if he comes around later or not. But without further ado, let's get some more people in here so I'm not lonely just making an ass out of myself. Here we go, my lovely wife and companion in just about every endeavor we do. Hello.
Hello, howdy.
So, welcome. I guess I need to turn this way to look like I'm looking at you. So anyway, looking forward to it.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
As many of you know, Liza Sahido here is, she's the driving force behind Psyche Electroacoustic Opera Company. At Psyche Opera is the username on YouTube. And she is a cigar box guitar builder and player. And so she's excited to be interacting with another fellow instrument maker. Before we get to that, we actually do have another maker here. He's recently been building some of his own stuff.
Really cool stuff too. Yeah.
Yes. So welcome back, Mr. Mountain Hawk. Hello, Mike. And we don't hear him.
Oh no, Mike, you're muted. Oh no.
Well,
There
it
we
wouldn't
go.
be earworms if I didn't make an ass out of myself.
You and me alike. Well,
Good evening once
we're
again.
two cheeks on the same bum here. So,
Ay.
so anyway,
Well, I was
welcome,
coughing
Mike.
a little bit. I think I'm getting a little cold.
Oh.
So I don't know.
So, Mike, where did you come across our guest tonight?
Well, it's been close to a couple years, I think. I was just looking for odd scale flutes, and not a whole lot of people do what this guy does to the extent that he does it. So I came across him on Etsy and was just blown away by the amount of different scales that he had. And if I remember right, I think I ordered like 5 flutes the first time around.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I've got so many now, I've kind of had to take a little bit of a break. But I'm very interested in these ocarinas. I might be looking into that in 2025 as my next Flute Wizard purchase. So, because I don't have any of those, but that's how I came across him, and it's been a lovely relationship. He's made a few custom flutes for me. So, and
Alrighty
rather
then.
timely, I might add. So,
Okay, good. Well, here we go. We're going to bring him on and we're going to put him center stage here. Kyle Neidig, is it Neidig or Neidig, the flute wizard?
It's Neidig.
And I don't think I succeeded in that. Hold on
It's
here.
okay. It's everybody gets that like a little weird. I've my whole life it'd be like Neidig or Neidig or but it's Neidig, but quickly Neidig, like fast. It's
No,
kind of
I
like
meant I
German.
don't have you on screen yet.
No
And
worries.
I don't
No
think
worries.
anyone's hearing you. They're just hearing me having
Gotcha.
problems. There we go.
yeah, he's on screen.
He's
Now he's on
now.
screen.
Now he
And now the audience hears him.
Yay.
Awesome. It's Neidig for everyone out there.
All right.
No worries. It's been something with my whole life. Everybody always kind of, if you got a weird last name, it's tough to pronounce.
So, where did your journey begin as an instrument builder?
Oh my goodness. Well, I can do a nice little summation here. I was heavily into chorus when I was a youngster, and I
Mm-hmm.
excelled very, very well in the field of singing up until the end of middle school. And I just had really good, like, relative pitch, like, kind of vibe. And
Awesome.
I was just enamored with music, and there was lots of various catalysts that came along the way, like babysitters that were like drummers, or my first concert was like Elton John and Billy Joel in the Giant Stadium when I was a young kid. So like, there was a lot of my parents were always good about like letting us listen to a wide variety of music. So I got exposed to a lot of different genres at a very early age, riding around in my mom's station wagon, and of course like just like various trips in the car or whatever. But instrument making in general, there was a few catalysts. Right around the middle of high school, I started to transition. An athlete for a while. I was a competitive gymnast, so I'm very acrobatic. I was into all that sort of stuff from like
Wow.
I was a young kid, like third grade until like 21. I was doing backflips all the time. So right around the middle of high school, um, I'd say like 13 to 15, I stopped being as interested in the sports world. Um, and I was hanging out with different friends. I was experimenting with cannabis and psychedelics and things like that at a relatively early age. And I basically just got turned on to the arts and music and cinema in a lot more of a potent fashion. And so I got my first hand drum. I got an African djembe when I was 15. And then I got like an ocarina from like Legend of Zelda out of like a video game magazine when I was like 13. And I had a lot of musical friends, but we all didn't start to really just like kind of mess around and experiment and like noodle around with each other until I was probably like 15, 16, 17. Um, and then right when I went to college, uh, my one of my dear friends named Amanda Bloom. She bought me a like a workshop in um, in a rural part of Connecticut,
Mm.
a Native American frame drum making workshop. And so I hung out with some traditional Lakota, um, a husband and wife, for a weekend with a bunch of other people at this Native American museum. And I was 17. I was like, fresh going into college. And I was very, very moved by making the drum. We soaked white-tailed deer hides in lye and like made from like fire ash and water, and then we like
Mm.
ripped out all the hair, and then we got a bunch of like wedges of like an ash tree that was a big trunk, and they cut it into like decent sized pieces, and then we took chisels and hollowed out the frame of the drum. And um, uh, I was very moved by that, and
Mm.
it was like it's always been something on the back of my mind, even when I was like 13, 14, maybe even like younger, like just thinking about the like traditions and tribal cultures and like ancient and more like primitive technologies and things like that. It was always in the back of my mind. I guess I always had uh, just like it was being whispered. It was being whispered to me in my consciousness from a young age up until when I had that first sort of more touching experience. So they took a liking to me. They pulled me aside, and I hung out with them a few times after the workshop. They taught me how to make a dream catcher. They taught me how to do peyote stitching, like beadwork and like loom work. They taught me a bunch of really interesting skills that are quite old and ancient. And so I was like, all right, like I like working with my hands. And then during high school, I would make macrame like hemp necklaces and stuff and give them to my friends.
Mm.
I had a couple other friends that would like, make like arrows out of reed from like the swamp, or make bows out of sticks. And it was just like it was always on the peripheral. And that was a big catalyst. And then I went to college, and then I was still playing my hand drum. I was like self-teaching myself how to, do hand percussion, and all of my musicianship is self-taught. I've taught myself everything by myself. And so I just started to get this kind of multi-instrumentalist, got bit by the multi-instrumentalist bug, and then I started to understand that my passion for cultures, music, food, language was this ultimately this ethnomusicological approach to it's like anthropology meets like the arts. And it was in me. It was just in me. And I didn't really know what it was until I found out the word. And then I was like, oh, like this is just like a part of my soul. It's a part of my spirit. Like that's the easiest way that I can explain it. It's just, it's either come naturally, or the intrigue or the passion has always been so potent that it's like you have to follow the breadcrumb trails. Like it's like in the old Looney Tunes cartoons when like something smells good, and then the scent of that like roast chicken has like a ghost finger, and it's like pulling you towards that, like that sort of thing. And so I just always followed that intuition. I followed my heart. In that the cliche aspect of like marching to the beat of your own drummer. I've
Mhm.
never strayed from that particular way of only doing me, and just like not letting anybody or anything get in the way. No naysayers, no nothing. Like just trying to stay focused, trying to like find out how to give my life extra meaning and purpose.
Mhm.
So 17, 18, 19, somewhere around there, after I learned how to make a frame drum, and I was getting really into African percussion and stuff like that, I always had it in the back of my head, like, oh, like, because I heard Native American flutes and stuff before, and like, I got myself a jazz flute to mess around with after I was playing the ocarinas for a little while, and I started to just accumulate an instrument collection, and it was getting kind of ridiculous and funny, so I started to just like say, oh well, what's that next thing that's like haunting me that I need to investigate? And so after some time, in between 17 to like 18, um, I always said to myself in the back of my head, man, I'd really love to apprentice under a master and like learn how to make a native.
Mhm.
And it was just like this thing that was just like, it was there. It was like, oh, I'd love to learn how to make a didgeridoo. Oh, I'd really love to apprentice under, a master and make a native flute. I'd love to know this. I'd love to know that. So many years go by, and it's 2009, and I am out of college. I've become a well-versed musician in playing the piano, playing hand percussion, self-teaching myself how to play the ocarina, the jazz flute a little bit here and there, just getting a very eclectic mix of instrumentation underneath.
Wow.
And
Mm.
so and of course, I hosted an open mic for 4 years straight at my college with some other friends that we did it together, and it was great. It was a paid gig. It was like the best thing I could have done for myself because I got to play music with people, regulars and random strangers, for 2.5 to 3 hours every Wednesday night for 4 years in a row. So that was a big, big aspect of my own ability to be an improv musician. Like I have a very good ear for improv. I can just jam with anybody. Like you could play something, you can noodle around, and I'll be like, oh. I'll noodle around for a second. I'm like, oh, you're playing in this. Now I can jam with you. Like I can just siphon it off. And so um, after all of that college time, um, I was I was living with family after college, and I was feeling kind of stagnant, and I wasn't really up to much. And then my friends and I went to a regional burn, kind of like it's a smaller version of Burning Man. They're all over the country, but we went to one in Deerfield, North Carolina, called Transformus. It's like outside of Asheville in the farm country, and so I had a great time at that festival, and then all of a sudden I realized that there was a lot of bamboo that was being used as structural things for people's theme camps. Like there was a huge bamboo grove on the farm that people were cutting down to like use as structural poles to make their theme camps look more, just to just for the overall construction. Like, they needed to hang something from something, or they needed to build some makeshift scaffolding, or, poles to erect certain stuff. So the spirit of the Burns is like everything more or less is like if you need it, just ask for it and somebody will give it to you. Like everything's kind of free. Like, money is contraband, more or less. So, in the spirit of that, I realized that as we were leaving the festival, um, there was a bunch of bamboo that was just strung amongst the ground over the entire campground, like just in places. Like people just bunched it up. They said, "Oh, we're done with it. Let's just leave it here, and then nature will take it back, and it'll rot and decompose." And I was like, I just looked at it, and I was like, that's, that's it. And then I was always like, still in the back of my head, like, well, what do I need? What materials do I need to actually like get this off the ground, to like to just even try? And literally, it was just there, and it just like said, "Hey, take me home." And I was like, okay. So we packaged up like maybe 12 really like 20-foot tall trees that were already lopped up into like luckily car sized like portions. So we took like 12 or 15 trees, bamboo stalks, like home. 12-hour ride from North Carolina to New York. And then that was like July of 2009. And then I just dove head first in. I made didgeridoos. I made flutes. I was just making stuff to make stuff. And the best part about the process was after I was researching a lot, I looked on YouTube, I just looked everywhere, but and there's tons of flute formats on the internet. There's famous ones like Flutopia and like Flutomat and like all these things. But I just looked up YouTube videos of like, where do you start? And I looked up
Mm-hmm.
a couple YouTube videos. I looked up a couple websites, and maybe like downloaded a couple things, like just to like have the information there. But watching the good part is like that was when YouTube was really starting to like take off, and
Yeah.
you could actually find the sort of information that you were possibly trying to look for. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't so saturated with the content that it is now, where it's like you can't even get a word in edgewise if you don't have like 5,000 plus followers.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's annoying as
Yeah.
fuck because like there's people like me, like, and that like are uh producing, content and passion that like is
Yes.
what people want to see, but like
Mhm.
I'm just getting like left out of the algorithm,
Well,
you know
somehow Mike found you.
Yeah.
I know.
And you know what, Kyle? I hope you don't mind, but for our audience, I think it'd be really cool if, and you could continue later, but if you
Gotcha.
could play something for them
Yeah,
so they
sure,
can hear.
sure.
Would you like me to play one of the videos of your jams? Like I loaded up one just for the hell of it. Is something called Live
Yeah,
at Skyway.
oh yeah, so that's like so if you could play it if you want to give people some music for a hot second. I'm happy to take a break from ranting at everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I want to give people a taste
Yeah,
of kind of,
go for
and
it.
plus the kind of vibe you were talking about seemed to go along with what happens in this performance.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
So
this is good. This is a good one.
this was earlier this year, probably in the like the summer, or the like late summer, fall. And so This is a great friend of mine. Uh, everybody should check out Eric Kallio. That's Eric, and then Kallio is Kallio. He is. I've known him for the whole time I've been out here in Portland. I've known him for close to a decade now, and he is an amazing, amazing singer, songwriter, guitarist. He plays the lap steel. He plays two types of dobros. He just is. He's an amazing person, and he's been a great friend of mine. And he and I gig with each other multiple times a year, and we have great chemistry. And this is a clip from one of our latest gigs with each other.
All right, great. And shout out to Scott in the audience there, and Adam. Adam, thanks for putting up links. We'll definitely be. And we'll have to tell the Wizard about B-roll stage. Friday night movies at B-roll stage. That's awesome stuff. So anyway, let's play this gig here.
Yeah, sure.
That is right down in the forest full of fuel. Ain't a damn thing either you or I could do. I'm back down burning everything round. We gotta start over pure with the sterile ground. Cause there's a fire in the hills. Burning hard, not so direction. Hard fire in the hills. It's coming down, just up the river. From my town. Flick that spliff out the window while you're here. Rolls on the trap pipe at the wrong time of year. Cherry touchdown, burning everything round. We gotta start working pure with the sterile ground. 'Cause there's a fire in the hills. Burning hard, not so direction. Hard fire in the hills. It's coming down, just up the river. From my town. Fire in the hills. Yes, there's a fire in the hills. Smoke in the ash, blowing in your window. We're outside 'cause the lungs can't breathe, no. Every year, the sun's the reason. We're so dry, it's fire season. Every year, the sun's the reason.
All right, I'm going to pause it there because I know we have a lot of things to get to, and
You guys
no
you
one's
get,
heard you play any flute
get
yet.
you get the point. Well, I mean, like, there's so many flutes to choose from here. I mean, goodness gracious. Um, let's see. I will play.
But no, I mean, I appreciate jams like that. That's, I mean, I've played in so many jam bands, I don't remember how many anymore. And, you know, when I was in grad school, I was actually making my living as a musician for a few years. And then I realized at some point that it's like I didn't want to be up at Tuesday nights until 2 a.m. playing in a bar. And so I had to work on the day job sort of thing. And that's when I went into academia.
Nice.
But anyway, share us one of your flutes.
Yeah, let's see here. Oh my God, there's so many to choose from. I guess um, let's do like a classic one first. Um,
And if you check out Kyle's YouTube page, there are several videos from that performance there. Some with the flute.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
yeah, I just
handful.
had what he gave me, and
He had a very
I
good one with Miguel from Singing Tree Flutes. That was a
Yeah,
really good one too.
there's a so
This
the
is links in the description also
yeah
for anyone watching this video,
Yeah,
whether it's
absolutely.
after the
Check it out.
fact.
my
We
YouTube is
do
pretty
have.
balanced with just like having everything in separate playlists and stuff, so it's easy to navigate. Okay, this is just a really nice, simple, a simple wooden flute made from reclaimed pine, actually. And
Wow.
you know,
Beautiful.
just a simple flute. This is in uh, classic G minor pentatonic, um, just made from reclaimed pine and just random boards and pieces of wood that were just like in the shed, outside. And so really, really lovely and warm sound from this flute.
All right, yeah.
Wow.
Really bright, even though it's a soft bodied wood, like in terms of soft, medium, and hard, the density, it's got a really bright and vibrant voice on it, which is nice, you know.
She's
And
gorgeous.
yeah, and as for something different, um, this is black walnut. Okay, and this is in C5, black walnut in an Arabian tuning, so the Arabian Hijaz scale. You feel it's a higher register, a little brighter, a little bit denser of on the Janka scale in terms of the hardness of the wood, so a lot more punchy tonal quality from something like this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Nice. Black
fun.
walnut. That's really pretty.
Yeah, black walnut's got some great. It's got good tonal quality to it. It's used in a lot of instrument making across the board. Various instruments. But it sounds when you make a good flute out of it, it's stellar. Um,
That was the other thing that got me when I was first checking you out was not only the different scales, but the different woods. I think I've shown on one of our shows the one you made me out of a sunflower stalk.
mhm.
That was very
Hmm.
unique.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I've got a couple unique pieces on the walls here that are of unconventional materials. I think that's one of the to have a segue there. That's one of the best parts about the flute making in general is that I've dabbled in so many different using so many different mediums for as the body of the instrument. Um, from bamboo to various types of domestic and exotic woods, whether they be soft, medium, or hard on the Janka scale. Um, and then sunflower stalk, tree of heaven, which Mike has
Yes.
some of my branch flutes from. Um, yeah, so tree of heaven is a really invasive species, but it's got a soft and pithy core that's very easy to drill out with a spade bit. As long as you have like a foot long spade bit, you can get at it from both sides, as long as you're keeping the flute kind of short. And you know, Tree of Heaven has excellent tonal quality. I'll play one real quick. Um,
Ooh.
and so
There's mine.
yeah, is that the harmonic minor?
Yes.
Yeah, that's rad. That's a good flute.
This is one of my favorites, actually. I play this one frequently.
So look at this wacky body on this flute.
Oh, I love that look though.
Like it's so this is like it's just a legit branch, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Was
Like
it
I
split like that on its own?
it was this is the way that I found it.
Wow. That is
Yeah.
cool.
And so it'd be this is a crazy flute because you know it's got a different mouthpiece on the side here. So like these are just two different types of wood that I glued onto the mouthpiece here. But this is B flat 4. So B flat the Aeolian minor. So a 6-hole Aeolian with 1.5 octaves of range. So it's a really amazing anomaly. The thing that I like about making the flutes out of other materials is that sometimes like even though they're imperfect, like this has got a weird crazy curve to it, and the acoustic physics as far as science goes might be a little iffy. The flute has a mind of its own. It has its own agenda. So, you know, when I was able to get this thing singing, it not only has like a perfect octave, but then it's got 1.5 octaves worth of range, and it's just like, how does this thing even like work? It's so cool.
Wow.
So it's a B flat minor in a 6-hole Aeolian tuning. Really bright, like really nice, bright, clean tonal quality from this branch. So really fun voice on this branch. So this is most of the flutes that are all on my walls. Like I've got a rack. I've got like 6 racks in this room, and this is where I just my flutes surround me when I sleep.
Awesome.
You know the cool part about different mediums to work with. I've made flutes out of animal horn, out of antler, like so Blessbach antelope, Springbok antelope, Gemsbach antelope, elk antler, goat horn, ox, like cow horn, water buffalo horn, sunflower stalk, which is a very difficult and fragile medium to work with. So you need a sunflower stalk that at least gets like 10, 11 feet tall. And then you can only use the bottom third of the sunflower stalk where it's at the thickest, like connected to the roots. So sunflower stalk, tree of heaven, all the different types of antler shed and that sort of thing. I made them out of bone. And I'm the first person ever, I know that my soul, I can feel it. I'm the first person ever to ever make a successful flutes out of cannabis stalk as well as mushrooms.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a video of the first ever mushroom ocarina that I sent
All right.
to the tech. So
Do
That's
you,
Wow.
the
that's a good
heck?
that's a good segue. So we should watch that one real quick.
Okay, well, let me
Yeah.
load it up first before I switch scenes so that
I'll
it's
show you
smoother.
I'll show you the cannabis stock flute though.
Um,
Ooh.
do
Right?
you do you remember what the title of that one would be?
It should probably just say red belted polypore mushroom ocarina.
Okay.
It's the only one of its kind in that
Okay. Well,
mix.
show what you're going to show, and I'll
Gotcha.
read these here.
So this is a cannabis stalk.
Hmm.
This was
Wow.
like a mammoth, a really big mammoth plant that one of my friends grew. And then uh, they were like, "Hey, like we know that you do this every once in a while." And like I've only made them out of the ones that I've grown, but then he hooked me up with this crazy big stalk. Um, I mean, the plant that he had must have been like at least 10 feet tall. And um, I've never worked with a stalk that was this big and this thick before. Um, and I was able to turn this thing into a low C4, like a bass flute, C minor pentatonic. It's got a very gentle voice, but really awesome flute. So this is like this is it's the only one of its kind. Like I doubt
Mm.
I'm pretty sure as a maker no one has accomplished this yet. So it's an anomaly. It's for sale, but it's a lot of money.
I bet.
Now,
And
have
it's
you
a
uh,
beautiful sounding instrument.
do you is oak a wood that's too hard to work with?
Nope, I got oak right here.
Ah,
Because
look.
we
Nice.
have an oak tree that came down with a hurricane this year, and we've been looking at ways to utilize, what we were given,
Mhm.
and I think it might be cool to make a flute out of one of the branches.
Yeah, it's possible. The main thing is that like when you're working with branches, like if you if you have the right tools, you can if the branch is straight enough, like you could shave off like some flat ends on either side of the branch so that it slides properly like when you put it on the miter fence of like a table saw or the miter fence of like a very high powered
Hmm.
bandsaw. Um, so if you can machine the branch into two halves and it's straight enough, then you could easily run it on a router and route out the
Well, what
the,
I
the
would do is
branch.
just, kind of like hold my phone up to the fallen tree, and
Yeah.
you could say right there that branch.
Well, if you're working with like
No, no, not me working with it. You would be working on
oh,
it.
of course.
We'll send you the branch,
He's going to
Kyle.
send you a
Yeah,
brain.
it'll be even sending me a branch. Well, it's a pretty heavy wood, so that'll be a pricey little
That'll
package.
be a
So,
pricey
Yeah,
shipping. Yeah.
yeah, but if you're working with like
but
if
it's
you
a tree that fell here, and there's a reason for it. So,
if you have any close friends that are woodworkers that could like mill a branch down into workable material, then it would be
yeah,
easier to send to me.
yeah.
But to put it into perspective, um, this is oak, but this is a dual bodied wood. So this is the cool part about flute making. And of course, with any instrument construction, guitars, even regular traditional drums that are composite wood that are all strung together, um, things like that. What I've been doing recently is I've been sandwiching two different sound profiles together and using two different types of wood to create sound profiles that don't exist in nature. So
Wow.
that's
Mm.
that's one of the cool parts about instrument making is that you can take two different types of wood. This is nice hard oak on top and then reclaimed pine as the spine underneath.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So you get the rich brightness from the hardwood, and then you get the supple, soft, warm tonal qualities from the softer wood. And when you
Oh,
combine
cool.
those, it does some crazy shit. So
Hmm.
that's one of the cool parts about instrument construction is that after a while, you can start like Frankensteining different types of mediums together, and it creates a sound profile that doesn't even exist in nature, and it's so unique that it's one of a kind, and you'll never have anything that sounds like it. So as for an example, like this this is another example. So what I played, uh, the cannabis stock was C. That was C4, bass range, minor pentatonic. This is the equivalent of the same flute, C4, minor pentatonic, but out of two different types of wood, a hardwood and a softwood. So you can still hear it's reminiscent of the other one, but it's a little bit more punchy. Like depending on if you choose to put the hardwood on the spine versus the softwood on top, it's going to shift the sound profile in one way or another. And there's lots and lots of really cool stuff that you can do like that. Let's say, for instance, this flute. This is a rare Oregon species called myrtle. So this is myrtle wood on top and black walnut on the bottom.
Oh, wow.
That's
And this is a great flute.
beautiful.
This is in A Chinese pentatonic. Okay, so it's got a super oriental soundscape to it. Really, really fun songs and melodies that this can sing. You know, when you're playing in these exotic tunings, the only downside to them is that for me. I don't necessarily like certain people might think it's a downside, but I think it's their strong suit. Is that they force you to like get locked into minimalism, and so you're stuck in this one register. You're stuck in this one mode. So it makes your brain think extra hard of how can I dance around all these melodies so that the arpeggiations and the patterns that I'm creating don't get stale. And that's a really cool factor when you're playing a more minimalist sort of pentatonic mode or one of these exotic scales that keeps you rigidly locked in to this particular vibe that you're playing in. So the only thing that alleviates that, what I've noticed, is having multiple versions of the same flute. So for example, now you can see, look at this sexy zebra wood flute.
Oh,
Look
that
at
is sexy.
look at how
Beautiful.
super pretty this grain is on this zebra wood, okay? And this is a low D. So this is a D4, basically like bottom of tenor-ish, like bordering on bass, in the same tuning. But instead of it just being, I put a sixth hole in here. Like honestly, the scale ends here with just the five holes. But I put a sixth hole in here. This one's a 7-hole flute with the exact same scale, so I just gave it extra range. I just gave it more notes that it can play. So now you can hear a harder wood. This is like medium, bordering on medium to hardwood, with the same scale at a lower register, and a very, very different vibe because the lower tones are more haunting. Really nice tone on this flute.
Oh, beautiful.
Well, before we
Thanks.
forget, I do have your ocarina
Yeah, pop that
called
on.
up.
Yeah, let's hear
So
that.
this is a mushroom ocarina,
Ooh.
and I gotta get the play button here.
Look at that.
This thing's fun.
Red belted polypore. E4. Ocarina.
Pretty crazy stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna stop this one
Amazing.
because it's not overly long, but it's beautiful what you're
Oh,
doing with the pedal.
Yeah, I made a little loop, just a simple loop.
Yeah.
Got some nice chordal structure going on there. Plain.
How did you get that to harden, or what did you do
Well,
with this one?
well, usually, uh, if you find like a shelf or a conch style like mushroom, like you can find them all over the place in the Pacific Northwest out here. Like there, you just walk out in the woods and you can see like 20 of them. But you have to go to like normally like the old growth forest, like a little further away from the city. And a lot of them, if they've been aging properly and not rotting and like molding in the woods, if they age properly, um, after you disconnect them from the tree
Mm-hmm.
that they're growing on, they'll kind of like anything that's like wood and certain materials that are natural that have pores and that have water in them. Eventually, the water evaporates and the material shrinks and dries out. Um, with a piece like this, um,
I just hollowed out like the underside of it. I hit it on the belt sander so that I could get it flat. And then I hollowed out the middle section with like various types of little drill bits and like rasps on my power drill and stuff like that. I just kind of gouged out a small little chamber, and then I slapped um, I slapped a wooden, like basically a wooden plate or like a shoe on the underside so that I could get a good glue seam and like get it solid. Um, but all I really did was once I like gouged out the mushroom and I was able to create like a wind chamber going down into it and whatnot. Um, I then just painted it. Like I painted the inside with like shellac so that it sealed the pores of the wood because it's very, very porous. Like that stuff, it's just like a reishi mushroom. Like they're so porous that even if you blew into it, your air would be diffusing into like the actual pores and the fibers of the mushroom. So
Hmm.
I had to create an airtight shellac on the inside of it so that it actually like creates an airtight hollow chamber so that actual acoustic physics can occur and the sound can actually vibrate and like
Right.
Hmm.
circle up on itself. So I mean, it's the first of its kind. No one's ever done that before. I'm the first one to do it. So
I
I
can
have
Wow.
imagine
I,
not. No.
Amazing.
I have like a two or three more little guys that have been like kind of drying in like brown paper bags for a couple of years. So I will do this again. That piece did sell. And if I was to make them again, they were it just took a really long time to make, so they're in like a really really high price bracket. But
I can
um,
imagine.
yeah.
Well, they got the first one.
So what's fascinating is like when you look at it, like I didn't I didn't realize it. Like I mean, I had the intentions behind it, but until it was actually complete and it was singing and it was making tones and you could play phrases with it, you know, uh, I uh, I realized like with the sunflower stalks, if you're playing the sunflower stalk, like you're playing the vibrations and the songs of the garden, or you're playing the songs of like the flower, and like you're just playing like you're receiving vibrational frequencies that like no one actually ever gets to hear. So
Right.
with the cannabis stalk, it's the same thing. It might be a very healing, and medicinal herb for lots of people, but they never get to hear what it sounds like.
Right.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's my intention behind it. It's like, how far can I take it? Can I, people like this for how pretty it is. Like, oh, the sunflower, it looks so pretty, but like, can it sound pretty? And so
Whoops.
that's the thing that I started to realize. And it's like, well, no one's ever heard the songs of the mycelium network that exist
Wow.
underneath our
Uh-huh.
feet. So it's like, well, if I can be a conduit and a catalyst to showcase what the songs of the mycelium network sound like for people, they might it might give them some extra perspective, or it might affect them deeply. It might be a powerful experience. And so that's generally like, I always want, as a creator, I want to keep pushing the boundaries of like what is possible to do so that you can give somebody an experience that they actually didn't even know was possible or even existed. So that's those sorts of pieces, the weird ones like antlers and animal horns and made out of weird material like branches and sunflower stalk and cannabis stalk and mushrooms and weird stuff like that. Um, you know, I've done with yucca. Like I have a really long term,
Oh,
fantastic friend.
wow.
Yeah, I've done it with yucca as well.
Mhm.
One of my long term clientele and friends sent me a big stalk that I cut up into pieces and made like
Oh
little.
my gosh. My mother used to grow yucca, and yeah, her stalks were really big. I've
Yeah.
never heard of anyone making flutes with yucca before.
And on same wavelength, I've made flutes out of like really big artichoke stalks
Wow.
before. Yeah, so I've done artichokes. I'm probably the first person to do that too. Now I think about it, but like it's like weird because all some of these weirder projects are like one-offs, and then like I go back to like doing my regular thing. Um,
Right.
so it's uh it's just um it's fascinating to be uh I like to constantly challenge myself when I can, and if I haven't done something yet, I need to like tackle it to check it off the list and say, okay, I learned what I needed to learn here. I'll commit it to memory, and then it'll help me out in the future. And like that's the sort of process that I always do. Like,
We grow Jerusalem artichokes here, and also sugar cane.
mm,
Sugarcane.
yeah,
So
sugar
Rosella has a
sugarcane is it's a flute meat. People have made the natives have made flutes out of sugarcane
yeah.
for a long time.
Mhm.
It's a common practice, or at least a nice ancient tribal practice. It's been done before,
Oh
but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's it's got a great sound if you do it right. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those things. Like there's just so much there's so much to explore. I
so
like
much.
there's so many mediums, and that's the thing. Like I have I have like a massive checklist in my head of like all the different types of mediums that I've worked with, but the checklist that is unchecked is still massive in the grand scheme of things. It's like, the average musician or the average instrument maker, whether you're using, cedar, maple, koa, all the classic woods that are generally, rosewood, like all these classic woods that are either used for classical instruments or regular standard modern instruments. there's like a there's like a a cyclical nature of like the common ones that are used in heavy practice. But what about all of like the unsung heroes and like the stuff that people don't hear every now? Yes, and I have the corn. I see it in the chat. I have made a flute out of a corn stalk too.
Hmm.
And so it's
Wow.
like you got to try it all. And like some mediums are more fragile than others, and you might have to reinforce them with plastic and or like polyurethane or shellac so that they get a little bit more weight. They get a little bit tighter. It will shift the sound profile a smidge, but the overall medium is still resonating as that medium. Like, so it's kind of you could split hairs with that aspect of the process, but there's only certain materials that like can actually unless you get a really big sunflower stalk and it's got like a decent amount of meat, like 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch thick walls, it's going to be fragile. So like
Hmm.
you need to find the perfect specimen in order to manipulate the material properly so that you can create a satisfactory instrument out of it. And like then if it goes from satisfactory to good to quality, it's all about the precision of the maker and like how they know what to do
Right.
and how not to overdo it or like mess up. So you know it's a weird thing.
That's an important aspect that
Yeah.
you, and I think I've touched on this before, is the maker of the instrument. Any instrument, it's true, but it really rings true with this. It actually really matters, um, that person themselves, what kind of person they are, what they're putting into it, the spirit of the flute, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that drew me to you. And the other thing you might want to touch on is if someone buys one of these flutes, is your process, and I'll let you explain that because it totally blew me away.
Yeah,
How you
so
feel and what you do.
I from as soon as I started to have general success, like right around like 2017, I was just kind of I had my feet on two different tracks. Like I was just working and making money as a professional chef and just like paying the bills and rent and stuff. And then I was doing my instrument making on the side. And enough time had gone by where I started to make more consistent sales, and 2017 and onward, things were starting to really pick up, and it seemed feasible for me to devote myself entirely to my art form and stop working for like someone else and stop working in
Awesome.
the system. And
Awesome.
so I said, well, I don't like to be micromanaged. Like in general, like I'm a Scorpio, I'm a pretty fixed personality. So like, I don't like to be told what to do, and I understand my competency and my integrity. And so once that particular aspect of working in regular jobs like got annoying, I said, well, I have the ability to possibly just be my own boss and do my entrepreneurial thing and make that work. And I devoted enough time to kind of laying the groundwork. So 2017 onward, when my Etsy sales started to pick up, um, I just said, well, this is going to be feasible. Let me just like put both of my feet on the track that is my passion and try to make my dreams work and just follow my heart and follow my intuition. So whenever I sell a flute, as far as I can remember, um, pretty much since about like the maybe the third or fourth or fifth sale that was consistent, way before Mike ever found me. Um, I adopted a little bit of a system into my customer service, which was when somebody buys a flute, I will make them a short video, a personalized video that pertains to the exact instrument that they bought and address them, greet them, show them my face. They can hear my voice. They can listen to icebreakers about their flute from the maker so that I can be as honest and as detail oriented as possible when trying to explain how to make their instrument operate the best. Even if they're a beginner, a novice, an intermediate, or an advanced, I do the same thing for everybody where I say, this is my baby. I made this. I am the most intimate with this. I know how to explain this the best. I'm happy to give you this information in hopes that it it puts the instrument into perspective and it allows you to just jump up on the instrument with a little less apprehension or timidness or being scared or knowing like, oh, he told me that my breath pressure the breath pressure required for this instrument is gentle to moderate, as opposed to certain flutes might be moderate to strong. And so, depending on the instrument, I'll give an articulated diagnostic of that exact flute and all the tips and tricks with fingering, breath pressure, the personality of the flute, maybe some stories behind the flute. So I'll just ramble most of the time for like 15 to 25 minutes as a complimentary service
Wow.
to the client that has purchased my flute because it's I don't it's felt like they deserve it like it's like I'm so grateful that they spent their hard-earned money like on a creation of mine. So
Nice.
that's what I do. It's a massively important part of my customer service, and
Hmm.
I am super, super happy that I've never strayed from that template because I believe 100% that um, it has probably been one of the major deciding factors of my success, continuously going upward every year that I've been doing this. So it's like just this extra added little thing that is just clerical to me. Like it's just part of the process. I just factor it in, and it's me being passionate. And so it's so easy for me to just like click record, set my tablet up right in front of my computer right here and just be like, here's your flute. Like, here's some interesting facts about it. I hope that this helps you. And then even just that alone, Mike, and I can't tell you, countless people have always like responded back to me with like a private email being like, you're like, oh, you went above and beyond, or like, no one's ever done this for me before, or like,
Because
wow,
no
like,
one has.
well,
I've bought other flutes
Right.
before I met you. You've seen my collection.
yeah, your collection
Nope.
is massive. You got a great one.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
nobody does that.
yeah, and so
It's
because like,
unheard of.
it's like it's something that I realized like was missing in the grand scheme of like the digital age where we're all like literally sharing a screen right now. We're all connected to the internet. And at the end of the day, when you're buying e-commerce and you're purchasing stuff online, it's such a um that's the downside to
Yeah.
e-commerce is that a lot of the time it's such an impersonal and
Yeah.
um like
Yeah.
it's an experience that is so like there's no personability there. It's just like
Yeah.
I bought the thing, they send the thing, and that's that. Certain people don't even send you an email saying thank you for like buying my
Well, most
product.
people don't.
Yeah, and so like I realized that early on. I was like, people are not being cordial to one another, like
Right.
in the ways that you deserve respect. And so I just realized that like that's something that's missing in the way that people handle private uh, handmade good transactions. And
Yeah.
I just was like, well, I'm just going to do this because this feels right. Like I'm not, it just feels so right that why would I stray, why would I stray from the format? And it's, it's a fascinating thing. Yeah, handmade versus like mass produced, and like you could just buy an item off of Amazon, and all they want you to do is like leave a review, and even the review is automated, and there's no personability there. And so,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
realized that with the digital age, and so the main thing that the reason that like I said before when we were chatting off camera before we started, I have always made sure that I keep one foot in both worlds. I have one foot grounded in the spiritual shamanic aspect of me being a human and a spirit in a body, and appreciating all the magic blessings and miracles that exist in this world, and the fact that it's history, and eras and heritage, and this and that. I have my foot in that world, and then you can't not have your foot in the modern ascending world of the digital age and this and that and the other thing. Like you got to keep up with the Joneses and like do all this stuff with tech, and like, you know, I'm a I'd rather be like just chopping the wood and carrying the water and living in the woods, but I have to be here too, you
Right.
know?
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
well said.
that's one of the things that like we we get caught up in all this bullshit, and it's like it's not
Yeah.
necessary. Like as long as you're
Exactly.
as long as you're doing what you're doing and you have time to tackle responsibilities, but then you give time back to yourself and your friends and your family and your loved ones. If you have a delicate balance there and it works, you're not doing anything wrong. So like
Exactly.
I try to flow with that particular mindset a lot of the time, and it keeps me good. It keeps me good.
Okay. Is there something you'd like to share
Yeah,
next?
I'll share
Either.
another flute. Um,
Okay.
Kyle,
so,
when you have time, I want to bring a bit of the backstage conversation
of
to
course.
the audience because, well, guys, just so you know, I was talking to Kyle before the stream about a custom build flute for me, something that a drone flute, something in the alto range because I love the alto sound. The problem I was explaining to Kyle was my fingers, my hands are very small. And this man has so much experience building flutes that he has found ways to build alto flutes, lower sounding flutes for people with small hands. So for me, that is something extraordinary. But after hearing the ocarina, I can see what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Going the ocarina route for having deeper sounding instrument for smaller hands. Anyways, I'll let you elaborate on that because
Well, sure.
anyways, yeah,
I will talk. I could talk about that in conjunction with all these. I'll show you.
yes.
I'll
Yes.
show everybody a couple really nice drone flutes that I've made over the years. Um, there's a contrabass drone. There's a couple mid-range drones, some alternating drones, and then a crazy wacky quadruple drone. That's a bamboo flute behind me.
Mm.
And so a lot of these have very intricate detail. So let's take, for instance, this one. So this is myrtle wood. This is a full bodied myrtle wood drone. Okay, and myrtle wood has just excellent tonal quality. It is a rare species. It only grows in southern Oregon, Northern California, and Jerusalem of all places. So it's a
Wow.
super rare wood. Luckily, we have some here in Oregon. And this is an Arabian drone. Um, it's got Om symbol out of turquoise on the bottom, and the Ankh, the Egyptian Ankh with the Eye of Horus, turquoise there, and
Wow.
really lovely sound to hear the Arabian mode that I showcased earlier with that black walnut, but in a drone vibe.
really, really fun to hear the Arabian scale, especially with this half step down here. It creates a lot of dissonance and like tension, which is really, really
Yeah.
cool. And this was one of the earlier drones that I made in my craftsmanship. I've since made them a little less blocky in terms of their shape, but this one is. I also just recently went back into this one and modified it because I needed to adjust its sound quality. This is cedar, regular old cedar with some maple. There's butternut, which is like a white walnut, uh, maple and yew, oak on the top here, spider, um, spider dripping venom down onto Amanita muscaria mushrooms with crystals and ayahuasca vine. So super plant medicine
Nice.
theme with this one. This is a eight. This is an 8-hold alternating drone. So it drones at the fourth and the fifth. So you got a thumb hole in the back for the right hand on bottom, and then a thumb hole in the back, and then you've got pinky hole here with the top hand. So really, really bright.
Mhm.
It was lower. It was at like it was I think what I did was I I needed to modify the holes, so I blew open the tone holes a little bit higher, and it wasn't a 440, but I shifted it to 432 hertz so that I could
Yeah.
make these finger holes a little bit wider, and then it was able to give the flute more juice and more volume, and it fixed a lot of tonal issues that I was having.
Yeah.
It's like an earlier piece, but now I've made it way better than it was before, which is nice.
That's actually what I do with my synthesizers and even the digital ones and analog ones. I tune them to 432 because I don't know. I mean, it just to me it all just sounds better. Uh, and uh,
432 is nicer on the voice too. Less
Yeah,
strain.
you can, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, to the discernible ear, it's just a smidge flatter. And so if it's flatter, it means you don't have to push as hard. And so you get
Yeah.
to relax a smidge. So you don't have to be as aggressive with your, with
Yeah.
trying to find
yeah, and I
the
also
pitch.
create sound experiences with binaural beating and
Cool, cool.
motion waves and things like that. And somehow the binaural beat tones and the frequencies that I use there, I through experimentation, I found that using 432 really helps.
I'll,
Another musician that I am going to have on soon, and maybe I'll let you know when I have him on. His name's Alex Petty. He did some research onto the fractals of nature, and
cool.
he believes in tuning middle C from 261.63 hertz down to 256, which in some ways makes us a lot of sense, such a central point, such a central frequency in the range of our orchestra of sound, so to speak. Um, if on 256, it's a power of two number. It's like a natural fractal point of a bunch of different systems of measuring numbers.
Wow. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
I just had in my head, we could talk about this a little bit later too, but the four of us should create some sort of fun like song together. We should do a collaboration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be cool.
That must happen.
Yeah, it'd be pretty cool. We should, with the tech, the synthesizer side, the guitars and the flutes and all the stuff. Like between the four of us, there'd be a lot of cool
But
soundscapes we could make.
originally,
Yeah.
I'm a saxophonist, so if you want to go
Cool,
acoustic, I can. I mean,
great.
synthesizers is just what I grown into.
I'm
But the
I'm I'm
saxophone's a
down
little
for
bit
whatever.
loud.
I'm down for whatever.
But I also
Uh,
play didgeridoo.
Sweet. That's great. I mean, that fits into the vibe.
I
This
just
is
love that one note.
I know, right? And this is a this is a pretty recent drone. This is another alternating drone, but it's only 7 holes, just the pinky hole here. This is leopard wood, which is super hard. Like, this is really, really dense wood, like
Wow.
definitely in the hardwood body. So it's like the tonal quality is just like, it just slams. It's super bright. It's super loud. And this is in, oh wait, actually no, this is an 8-hole alternating drone, as well. So this is in B, this is B 432 hertz, 440, I'm sorry, 440. Scott,
Mm.
how do you place the holes? It's basically, uh, there's set math that exists between the overall sound, like the ratios of what a hollow circular chamber can produce. So depending on the internal diameter, the overall circumference of that hollow chamber, usually there's very specific cookie cutter math ratios. You've got 5/8 inch bore, you've got 3/4 inch bore, you've got 1 inch bore, you've got 1 1/4, oh, you got 7/8 too. You got 1 inch bore, 1 1/4 inch bore, and usually once you're bordering on 1.5, you're in contrabass size flutes. Okay, so within all of those specs, usually you have a certain amount of space in terms of the length of that chamber to um, to yield a tonic, a fundamental root note of that particular that ratio of the circle versus the length, and that is so. I don't know. I'm not too savvy with fluid dynamics per se, but um, there is a lot of like traditional math that basically boils down to, depending on the diameter of the hole and the length of the chamber, you have a certain amount of notes that it can hit before that particular math frequency becomes no longer applicable, and then you have to move to the next size. So let's say, for instance, like a 5/8 inch bore is only going to yield you like really high, like upper soprano at like type flutes. And then if you move to like 3/4 inch bore, you'll get soprano, like maybe, E5, F5 down to like B. I mean, actually, no, you can get, what the crazy part about it is that, like, let's say 3/4 inch bore, you can get like F5 all the way down to G4. So all that space in between that 3/4 inch bore diameter, depending on the length of that pipe, will give you all of those notes. And then within that framework, then that's where the more complicated math comes into play. Knowing where to put the holes is, it's like you have to make a whole boatload of mistakes before your eyes and your intuition memorizes the overall like pinpoint, like where you pinpoint things. There's plenty of math out there that's like really, really dry and cookie cutter that you could follow on the internet. Tons of YouTube videos, tons of stuff on Flutopia and whatnot. But there's still, from what I've gathered over the years, there's still a really, really intense intuitive process that does not come like with instructions, and
Right.
that's the hard part. It's like you can make a really good like Native American style flute, like a 6-hole minor pentatonic, by following like 3 simple rules. One, if you get the fetish and the totem, like, and the fipple cut properly and the flute is operating and it's making a sound, but there's no finger holes in it yet. A very, very simple like rule of thumb for a minor pentatonic is you take from where the fipple rectangle is right here to the bottom of the flute, and you measure that. Let's say the flute was, I don't know, 18 inches in length. The middle third of that math is where you would sandwich the 6 finger holes into. So 6 inches from the top, 6 inches from the bottom. That middle third, if you cut the pipe in 2/3, that middle third section is where you're going to have the wiggle room to apply those notes, or those finger holes get drilled or burned into the instrument. And that's just me, that's that's very crude. Okay, so that's like, if you really want to just crack a few eggs to make a good omelet, that's the easiest way to start. So that's the sort of thing, if you're going to make a minor pentatonic flute, like the middle third of the overall length of from the fipple rectangle to the bottom of the flute, that's the easiest way to just start. And then usually the finger holes will be equidistant from each other, so that's another solid kind of easy template to follow. But that is I'm being very, very simple with trying to explain it that way. There's tons of extra stuff that comes into play, but knowing where to put the finger holes is just understanding the math and the pipe diameters and the ratios over time. And I've made it's basically if you make a handful of the same flute, you copy and paste that flute over and over again. Let's say I made a boatload of C5s or a boatload of B4s or a boatload of G4s, and I made them over and over again. And usually the math will be pretty cookie cutter and easily replicatable. Once you get that down and you're okay, I can make these various models, and I have templates for them. So whenever you do something right, you write it down. And then every once in a while, there's going to be an anomaly, and it's going to break the rules. And you're going to be well, why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening. And that's the stuff that you have to be really fluid and on your toes with that sort of stuff. And it's part of the language that the flute making speaks. It's half, I'd have to say, to be perfectly honest, the flute making process is half or maybe 3/4 intuition and 1/4 math. And that might, other flute makers might beg to differ, but that's how I see it, because I've always been self-taught. So I've had 1 or 2 people weave through my circle here and there that have maybe given me a tip or a trick, but predominantly everything is about experimentation, and then
Right.
you keep on messing up until you get it right. And then when you get that one model right, you write that shit down.
Yes.
And then you've got at least one solid thing. And then maybe eventually, then you'll have 2 solid things and 3 solid things. And then after you get across the board, then you could have everything from the higher pitch flutes to the soprano, to the alto, to the tenor, to the bass, and then the contrabass. I have to say, though, the hardest ones to make are these behind me, these contrabass flutes. They are on a whole nother territory. Their math is wacky and uncomfortable on the hands, and all these things. And it's basically, there's a general rule of thumb: the smaller the flute, the closer the finger holes are, and then the bigger the flute, the farther the finger spread is. And that's a very common aspect from high soprano all the way down to contrabass.
But Kyle, you've been able to you've cracked enough eggs to kind of figure out how to accommodate small hands.
Yes.
Flutes that are larger for small hands. Can you explain to the audience
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's a great example. So let's take a look at this flute.
Gorgeous.
You can see how the bottom 3 holes are pretty much equidistant from each other, and they're the exact same size.
Yes.
And then you see how the top 3 holes are a little bit smaller, and then the top 6 hole up here is the tiniest.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So given when you're confronted with a spacing such as this. The way that the acoustic physics work on a hollow chambered pipe, okay, whether it's ovular or circular, it doesn't matter. It's still going to make a tone. Let's say I pop this hole in here, and the way to get it in tune was to blow it open so that it was this big. So when I burn holes, and I've got these different types of rods, and I stick the rod into the wood, and the rod tapers and flares up more, so it gets thicker an inch towards, when I start sticking it down, the rod flares up. So um, the rods are tapered so that you start off small, but the further you push it into the material, it'll widen and burn that hole to a larger circumference. Okay. So let's say I pop this in here. Um, I liked the tonal quality. It was letting out enough oxygen. It was producing an appropriate tone, breath pressure, and just the overall, like, the wind that was cascading through the instrument was operating properly. That's fine. Okay. But let's say for your request, that bottom hole, like, let's say if all of these were gone and this was the first hole that I put in the piece, okay? That hole, maybe for your hands, might still just be a little big. Like, it would better off be looking like this hole up here to probably for your finger pad to cover it
Yeah, for
better.
sure. Yeah.
Exactly. So the way that you get around that is that, so this hole being this wide gave me the note that I wanted. But that doesn't mean that the note doesn't exist a little bit further up. So if you put that hole in between here and here, between holes 1 and hole 2, that just means that the hole needs to be smaller. So if you, the further, basically the rule of thumb is the further you climb up the chamber, the sharper the tone is going to get. So when you pop a hole in a flute, if you put it in the right space and it can fit your finger pad, great. And then you need to know the equidistant spacing between hole to hole. But if you put it there and it was too big, or you undershot, so maybe I put it here and the hole was flat and it wasn't reaching the green line on the tuner, that means that I was supposed to put it up a little higher. And so when you know how to manipulate the material like that, I could have probably for this type of flute, I could probably put this size hole right here between, and get a satisfactory result with smaller finger holes. The only downside is it depends on the material. So a softer wood, soft woods have quiet voices. So the softer the timber, the softer the material, the more porous it is. So the more porous and soft a wood is, the more it's going to suck your breath away. The more it's going to suck sound away. Doesn't even mean it doesn't have to be a flute. It could be a body of a guitar. It could be anything. So the main thing there is, if the material is bright, if it's medium to hardwood, then you're just going to have, like, if the finger holes are smaller, as long as they're in the right spot, you can pull back on them with your breath pressure. So you could be a little bit more timid and a little bit more reserved and gentle with your blowing power. And there's a sweet spot there. So if you put the hole, if you pop the hole, let's say in between those first two finger holes, and it was smaller, but as soon as you blew a little too hard, that note went sharp and it was leaning more towards the half step above what it was intended to be.
Right.
That's when you have to understand that, oh crap, maybe I should have inched that hole down maybe 2 or 3 millimeters. And so that's where it's all about the microns after that. So that's where the intuition comes into play. Like, and there's ways of, like, if I got my burning tool and I'm poking a hole in the flute, there's ways of, like, dragging down or dragging up, like, so that you can contour the hole so that the overall burn mark that you made is either pitched a little lower or pitched a little higher than your intended initial stab that you're making on the material. But you don't get that wiggle room with, like, let's say, a drill press.
if you
Right.
put the flute on a rack and it's locked in place, and then you pull your drill press down and it's drilling a hole straight through, you don't have all of that range of oh, I have to counteract like where I put the hole. You just went all the way through, and then you have less you have less degrees of being able to fix the whether it's flat or sharp, depending on those microns. So there's a lot of really weird stuff there. But yeah, being able to take a flute and just say, okay, you have a threshold, and it's these are the main thresholds. It's a finger hole, like let's say like this. Um, you see how this second hole right here is tiny,
Yes.
and then you see how on this Arabian the first hole right here is tiny.
Yeah.
So those are smaller holes, and the overall range of hole diameter that you can have on a flute is generally like an eighth inch diameter, quarter inch diameter, and all the way up to a half inch diameter. Now there's one like this flute. This flute's got a gaper. This is
Yeah.
this one's like this one's maybe a centimeter and almost an eighth. So like this is a big hole.
Yeah.
So that's because, and to be honest with my work, I undershot that hole. So since I didn't want to cover that hole up or fill it with inlay, I had to make it a gaper and I had to make it big. But in reality, this hole should have been like right here instead, and then it would have been smaller. There would have been a further gap between hole one and hole two, but that's easily accessible by either just using your pinky instead of what I like to do. I use pointer on most of my Arabians. I use pointer, middle, and ring. But if there's a really large gap between hole one and hole two, you can just use your pinky instead, and you can get all the way down here. So there's some really interesting things that happen with the math. And so for a flute like yours, if I was to custom make you a flute, I would edge on the side of trying to make all the finger holes only a quarter inch in diameter with maybe a couple millimeters wider here and there. Because, I mean, I've seen some of your videos and your hands are like, they're not super slender, but like, it's like you, at most, you wouldn't want to necessarily cover a bunch of finger holes that were like close to a centimeter in diameter. You'd rather prefer them to be a little bit more closed in.
Yeah.
But within that framework, it is always possible to pull out that manipulation of the material. You just have to know what you're doing, and you have to hope for the best. And then it's a matter of like, sometimes if the hole isn't big enough, it's not letting out enough air from the flute, and then it might cause like um, frequencies to like bounce back
Right.
on themselves. And so if it's all about the like, I like to look at finger holes as like off gassing valves, like they're valves. So if you lift a valve but there's still too much pressure inside the chamber, then if you're blowing moderately to strongly, because there's an extra pressure cascading all up and down inside of the chamber, it's going to probably force your note to be sharper than you want it to be.
Yeah.
And so then that's a matter of the player being disciplined with their chest and their diaphragm and their breath pressure control, which is a whole nother aspect of flute playing that will allow you to contour your playing to suit the flute.
Right.
So
Right.
that's one of the things with like contrabass flutes, is that they require like nothing but tummy and guttural like huffing versus chest and cheek and throat pushing. So you're doing a lot more diaphragm, a lot more guttural like huff from the tummy, more instead of with the chest and the throat. Depending on the flute, when you're working with contrabass flutes like that, they make you slow down like crazy. They make you put your breath into the instrument so slow and so casual that it's almost as if you're not even breathing. You have to be really slow and really methodical with your breath. So I can show you right here as a segue. this is a crazy ass big flute.
Oh,
Yeah.
gorge.
So this is off another full myrtle wood body, and um, it's got turquoise and cedar. It's got antler mouthpieces in the back. Got this crazy dragon that is holding a gem right here, and then it's got turquoise inlay, another ohm symbol, and this is this is a contrabass F3. Okay, so
Nice.
this is an F3, and the playing pipe is a C4, and this is the bamboo equivalent. So
Nice.
this is an F3. This is a contrabass F3. Okay, and see how big this bore is?
Yeah.
That's like an inch and a quarter to an inch and a half size bore, somewhere in there. All right, and so usually the larger diameters, the inch and a quarter to inch and a half, can hit everything from B3, low B3, down to D3, which D3 is usually the biggest flute that anybody can make. There's a couple people out there that have successfully made models of them. My friend Miguel Medina is one of them, and it's the hardest and biggest flute to play. They are the biggest, basically the biggest flutes possible without having to incorporate orchestral style keys and pads that like allow you
Right.
to traverse large distances. So the moment you get past the D3, which is still like a massive flute, you need to start using technology like the levers and the pads and the keys and all that stuff. That's why if you look at the contrabass flute, the subcontrabass flute, the bassoon, the clarinet, you look at all these crazy orchestral instruments, the big ones, like the really, really big wind instruments that you don't see many people playing. They're just this mess of keys and levers and things like that. And so the that's the crazy part is like after you get past like an acoustic flute that would be that big, you need to start using all that extra like mechanical wear and mechanical tech like on the flute. So I will demo this real quick. This is a C4. Uh, so this is basically um, they call this um, this would be a this is a perfect fourth. So F F3 and C4 on this playing pipe. So creating a perfect fourth, and this playing pipe is in Dorian mode. So it's
Nice.
one note different than Aeolian, and really fun sound from this flute actually. It's a bit of a beast. So I'll stand up to play it. Really, really,
Oh,
really lovely sound on the
Yeah.
flute.
beautiful. Oh,
And
gorgeous.
so you can get these really crazy big contrabass flutes. I think I personally feel the person the the maker and my colleague and friend of mine that's leading the way in that department is Miguel Medina of Singing Tree Flutes. He's a great friend of mine, and his contrabass drone flutes are out of this fucking world, and he does such a good job. And so one thing that I've been exploring is I've made bamboo drone flutes hands of times, but they're kind of different. Like you have to sometimes make like a connecting mouthpiece that they kind of insert into because they don't work the same way as like you could, that's a big block of wood that I machined with machinery versus trying to do something like this.
Nice.
So this is a really rad piece. This is a quadruple chambered flute,
Wow.
and this has it's really 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 cool and simple construction. It's got an amazing black walnut and myrtle wood mouthpiece right there. Really, really gorgeous grain on that myrtle wood. This big chunk of myrtle wood right here. I see this like really cool. It almost looks like a pencil holder type vibe. And
Yeah.
so these pipes. This is a G4. No, I'm sorry. This is a D4, and then this is a G4, and then this is a D5, and this little guy right up here is a G5. So it's got a D4, a D5, and a G4 and a G5, and it creates some crazy, crazy harmonies with itself. It's a really lovely flute. So this would be considered like a quadruple chambered alternating drone flute.
Wow.
Mm.
And it's got three on the D pipe, it's got three on the G pipe, and then it's got a thumb hole on the D5. And then the G5 is just off on its own, being this like high pitched drone, while the rest of everything. So I have a little bit of wiggle room with the D5, but the majority of the harmonies and the phrases that can be played with this are with the two main pipes right here. Really, really, really fun and haunting. There's a video that I sent of me playing this flute, but with like a sexy backbeat behind it and stuff too. So you can hear a little bit of a different application of how, like, where the potential of where you could take a flute like this. Really, it's like a mouth organ. Like, it's just so fascinating to hear.
Yeah.
Kyle, was that inspired by the Chinese Hulusi?
The overall shape just ended up looking like the Halusi, but no. Like, I just made it I made it without like
Without
the
studying the instrument,
yeah.
the
I
other
mean, like
one. Yeah.
I've wanted one. Like, it's really cool with the gourd and like the three pipes coming out of the gourd. Like, it's a cool instrument, and it has like a nice buzz to it and like an interesting sound. I've always wanted one. I haven't grabbed one yet, but maybe like the shape itself ends up looking like it, but it wasn't like directly inspired because of it. I needed to find a piece of wood that like was wide enough to insert all those pipes into.
Right.
But then I needed to make the mouthpiece conical enough so that I could get my mouth firing all chambers at once.
Right.
Which
So
isn't easy.
no, because
No.
that like the like the drilling that I had to do in here to connect each chamber to each individual, like when I inserted them up inside of the thing, it was like, if I didn't drill it right and I didn't get the holes lining up, it would just be a waste. It wouldn't have worked. So it's like I was able to like at least get the holes in the right spot, but that took a while to like set up and like line up and stuff.
And people don't think about with these drone flutes, because I love drone flutes myself, but if you're thinking as a beginner, it's not really the best thing to start out with, because each one is different, and then your breath between the two holes on some of them has to be a little bit different.
Yep.
So every flute is different.
Absolutely.
But what you do, and I wanted to touch on it a little bit.
Oh, that one's cool. That's a cool video.
Yeah.
Oh,
you
can
mentioned the.
Well,
continue.
I'll let Mike finish.
Yeah, continue, Mike.
Well, no, you touched on the burning method. You do a unique method to your flutes that not other people do, and it really turns out nice. You were showing it. I had one in my hand too. Yeah, this is a Dorian, that B Dorian you.
Oh
So,
yeah, my blowtorching technique.
yeah,
Gorgeous.
blowtorching technique. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's not something everybody does.
What's nice about the pyrography and the blowtorching on the wood is that it serves two purposes as far as I'm concerned. The first purpose is that it's basically like if you treat the material as if it's being blacksmithed. So when you heat steel and you heat metal and you're blacksmithing it and you're tempering it and you're raising it to a certain temperature and then you're squelching it in the cold water and all this stuff, it's tempering and strengthening the material. So when you heat up bamboo, you're expelling the moisture, you're expelling the sap, you're expelling the water, the residual water that's still left in that stalk. You're pushing it all out to the edges of either side of the pipe before you begin working on the flute. And so not only does it prevent the material from usually developing cracks and splits for the most part, at least 80 to 90 percentile range, as long as you've let the bamboo dry naturally ahead of time for a couple of years. But you're expelling the moisture, you're tempering the material, you're strengthening and you're tightening the pores and the bonds of the fibers of the actual material. So you're making it constrict down onto itself, therefore tightening the pores and making the acoustic resonance, like the resonance quality of that material, to be much more ideal and airtight and sound tight. Like so,
Wow.
that not only is it aesthetically pleasing if you get a good pattern down and you know how to, like, draw with the fire, but on top of that, it is massively important to preserving the longevity of the instrument, so it has a massive shelf life, but also it makes it structurally more sound and better to work with, because if you just think about it like blacksmithing, you're just tempering the material and you're making it stronger than it was before, if that makes sense. Like, and you put the fire magic in, so it's like, if you're working on an elemental basis in like the that sort of perspective of things, I work with all the elements when I make a flute. I use water, I use fire, the instrument is made out of earth, I use metal, I use the ether around me. It's like it's a full, and then the air, the breath of you breathing life into the flute. Flutes are like I might be biased here, but I think they're like the ultimate fucking instrument. Like they are like
Absolutely.
they are, aside from using your voice and smacking on drums and sticks from like ancient days, I think flutes and drums and voice are like the ultimate and the most old things out there. At least
Yep.
that's what that's what I've always felt. So it's like you got to study the past to make sense of the present and the future, and I
Yes.
think that flutes do that a lot. They make it, yeah.
100%.
You do,
Thank
and
Yeah.
there's a lot you can do with them too.
yeah
Scott was asking a question a
yeah
little while back about the shape of the overall flute,
yeah.
and I mean the quick answer is yes, but I'll let you elaborate. I believe he was asking. I can't see it now,
Oh, let me
but
try to pull it up, Mike.
the, the
Let me.
shape of the openings, like flat versus round.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Like
There,
you're talking.
there,
Does
there you
the
go.
shape of the opening, like round versus flat, affect the sound?
It
Like
it had a
round versus
follow up.
flat, like in terms of like the are you talking about the fipple, the fipple rectangle right here? Is that what you're referring to? Like the fipple edge? That be the opening that you're referring to? The general shape of the overall flute, I mean. Okay. Um hey, I I don't really think that the overall shape is like a it's yes and no. If you're going to make a flute that is, let's say, some of those wooden flutes that I've shown today that have been two separate planks of wood routed out with a router with a machine bit that's mathematically perfect, and then sandwiched together, you create a perfect chamber, a perfect circle with only microns of, you know, wiggle room there. Like when you do the traditional flutes, um, a a perfect circular chamber and the length straight, that will, as far as, let's say, if you look at acoustic and orchestral instruments as far as they're concerned, the reason that all those flutes have so much range is because they are of a certain uh, diameter and length, and it's perfect. It's like absolutely perfect. So only I'd say yes if you're looking to have extended range with what the flute can do. So different scales, and different modes, different exotic scales and modes and sets of intervals that are placed on the flute will have different upper register capabilities. So let's say an overtone flute, like a fujara, like a Slovakian fujara, or a Peruvian grandfather flute, or even like kavals, Bulgarian kavals, all these different instruments. You've got these really like small. A lot of time you got an inch to 7/8 inch size bore, but a long ass flute, like somewhere way over 3 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, maybe 5 feet. Um,
Wow.
and Fujaras can get to like 6 feet because they're fucking awesome.
Hmm.
But the you're gonna get overtone capabilities, being able to play the root note, then the next octave, and the next octave, and the next octave. But you're not gonna get a lot of fingerhole capabilities. So there's a sweet spot between having the right diameter and the right length to have the flute have a little bit more extra capabilities. So an Aeolian or a Dorian or a harmonic minor, or harmonic minor, Dorian, um, Aeolian, and Arabian. Those four modes, as far as my general craftsmanship goes, they usually have the capacity to be 1.5 octaves of range, which is going through the first 6 finger holes, closing your hands back down again, overblowing twice as hard, and then lifting up the bottom 3 holes again and be in the next register. So there's certain flutes that a perfect circular bore with the perfect length will yield more extended high octave capabilities. So that is the number one, the first part to answer your question. And then that's only if you want those perks. So I've made flutes that have had like flat and ovular bores. I've made a flute that had a bore like this. It was flat on the bottom, but only half moon on top. Like, you know, I've had uh I've seen people make flutes that have a square, like the whole chamber's a square. That's just they just slapped 4 pieces of wood together and they created a square as the hollow chamber instead of a circle, and those work too. So the cool part about flutes, and I think the acoustic physics behind the aspect of a hollow chamber in general, is that if you have a hollow chamber, you can turn it into a flute, and it doesn't matter what it is. So you're gonna get takeaways. You're gonna get like these variations on what can and can't occur. Like a perfect circle with the right length is going to yield like a lot of desirable playability. But I've made some flutes that like aren't perfect circles and they do the exact same thing. So it's like there's these anomalies. Like I can show you right now. I'll pull off 2 double octave flutes off the wall that are just a straight pipe, but it has two whole octaves worth of range, and the differences in them are shocking. So
Huh.
it's really crazy. So check this out. Here we have a this is a G4 Aeolian minor. This is a 3/4 inch bore. Okay, this is a skinny flute, a long and skinny flute. So G4 Aeolian minor. This is bamboo. This is an F4 in an Arabian tuning. But look at this curve. It goes up. You see how it's got a curve to it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this bore, look at this
Nice.
bore. That's super irregular in there. Like not perfect whatsoever. It just goes all over the place. This is a double octave Arabian, and this is a double octave G Aeolian. So you can see that with this being a machine perfect flute, with all the math, using a router, doing all the fun tech, using the actual machinery, you've got You hear that? I did two full registers worth of notes in this flute. Okay, and that's
Which
just
is
with
rare.
overblow. Oh, super rare, super rare.
Super rare.
So, the average person that makes a solid Aeolian or Dorian or harmonic minor or, those types of, or you can get 1.2, to 1.25, like 1.5 worth of range if it's made well. But you don't always get to the fourth or the fifth or the sixth finger hole. It doesn't always work out. It's not always guaranteed, especially with bamboo. Bamboo, it's never guaranteed. So you're just lucky if you get it.
Hmm.
So this is an Arabian flute, a whole step lower from G to F, but you can see how this flute, even though it breaks all the rules and isn't perfect on the inside, still gives me 2 octaves worth of range.
Nice.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's like, it's a two-parter to answer your question. It's like a yes and a no. Like, there are anomalies that will just break the rules because that's what the flute wanted to do. It also it boils down to like where you put the finger holes and how knowledgeable and intuitive the maker actually is to like pull out the best result from the flute. But like with a flute like this, usually if you know where the math belongs on a flute that is more machine made, and or you use all the extra power tools to make the flute more mathematically perfect and precise, if you use the right wood and you put the finger holes in the right spot, you're usually going to be guaranteed extended range dependent on the scale that you actually put into the flute. So anything that's a medium to a hard bodied wood in terms of the density and the Janka scale, they're usually, since the pores are so tight, they just shoot the sound out of the flute so cleanly that usually they're not absorbing your wind, and they're not absorbing the sound frequencies and sucking them into the fibers of the wood. Therefore, the projection is louder and the upper register activity will generally be a lot more achievable or easily accessible a lot of the time. So there's some really fascinating parts to the process. It gets super deep. Like there's like the bare minimum, and then there's like 101, and then 201, and then 301, and then like 401 and 501 are like in the weird like intuition based aspects of like, oh, this is where like you just have to like for me, I think what I've understood over time is that I've had I just have conversations with the material. Like I talk to it. I actually talk to it. I don't like I ask it questions. I literally like talk to the material and ask it questions and make sure that I hold it for long enough where I do like a muscle test and then it responds back to me with the answer that I needed to hear. So
Hmm.
it's a very intuitive process down the line after you learn the math. And the math is not always perfect. So sometimes you're just doing everything regular, but then the flute doesn't work out. And then you're like, oh, like, so sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it. And to get back to your question, yeah, it's like in ideal specs, ideal scenarios, yes, it's really, really nice if you want to like milk the utmost potential out of the instrument. But there are always exceptions to the rule that they'll break the rules all the time, and there's just anomalies and shit are like really crazy. Oh, happy belated, or is it today, Mike?
Yeah, it was yesterday, but
Oh,
thank
happy
you.
belated. Yeah.
Thank you, folks.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was
Hey, Mike, you didn't tell us it was your birthday.
yesterday
Aw.
on the solstice.
Oh,
Nice. Hey,
wow.
that's cool. My mom's birthday was yesterday too. You have the same birthday. That's cool.
Yeah,
Rock
yeah.
Hmm.
on. So let me show this one real quick.
Oh, look
Um,
at that.
Oh man.
Ooh.
so this is another myrtle wood drone, and lots of inlay on this puppy. 3-tiered mouthpiece right there. Turquoise malachite and lapis lazuli.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, lots of detail. Like all this work was wood burned, and then from the wood burning, then I did the inlay inside the wood burning. So
Hmm.
this is all lapis and malachite and turquoise that make this dream catcher and this mushroom crystal.
Beautiful.
And
Oh,
Hmm.
this is a triple drone,
Yeah.
and
ooh.
this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a 10-hold instrument. It's crazy. There's a lot going on in this flute. Sounds really nice though. And you can switch to the middle pipe if you just want to play the middle pipe. And then you can play all three. So yeah, this has the minor third, perfect fourth, and the perfect fifth. You can do a lot of kind of bouncing back and forth and alternating between like the pipes and these types of flutes as far as hand posture and fingering and breath pressure. To actually comment back on what you were saying earlier, Mike, is that um, people, I get this a lot when I'm doing consultation, and people are like, oh, I want a bass flute so bad. And I'm like, how many flutes do you own? And they're like, I don't own any flutes. And I'm like, then you shouldn't start on a bass flute. And they're like, but it sounds so good and that's what I want. And I'm like, yeah, but you just don't get it yet. So it's like, you have to like do these disclaimers where the same thing goes for drone flutes. Not only are you playing one flute, but you're playing two flutes, and therefore it requires twice the amount of air
Yep.
that you may not actually have available in your chest just yet. So it's like, some people want to do their hard homework first, and that's fine. I've always been kind of that way, but like to give like disclaimers like to people that are novice or beginners or like just getting started, it's like you don't want to discourage anybody from playing the flute. You want people to play the flute. We need more flute players. It's a very important thing, and so it's a very healing and amazing. It's a medicine tool, like through and through. So as are most instruments in general. But with that being said, it's like drone flutes require an entirely different discipline, and you're playing two flutes at once. You requires twice the amount of breath pressure that you might not even have dialed in to play one flute just yet, and then you have all this extra, like you're holding a wider piece of material. Your hands might not have the posture like down. You might get a lot of fatigue, and then again, there's the subtleties between each pipe where it all boils down to the maker and their discerning ear and how well they can balance those pitches and the frequency between both pipes. So like if you look at here's a great example. So you're looking at this drone flute, and then we're going to look at the playing pipes tone holes. Okay, there's kind of concentric, like 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, then you flip it over here, and you only got 3. So that will give you insight onto the the playing pipe needed that extra fourth little hole because it was still flatter than the drone pipe. So you have to be able to discern all of these microns in the minutia of like hearing you got to hear everything. You got to hear it in your ears. You got to watch your tuner. You got to look at the line on your tuner. You got to understand everything from 40% flat to 30 to 20 to 10% flat to 5% flat. And then the same goes with sharp. And then how do you balance that? Like some people make their flutes so that their drone pipe is just a hair flatter than their playing pipe, because once you get up to the top 3 holes on a flute, you're pushing a lot more strong breath through the final notes. And so that means that if you're playing this section a little sharper, then it might match out and balance with the other pipe. But that's all a matter of the material, and it's a matter of the person and how they play. So the flute needs to be made well first and foremost, so that it splashes across the average playability of an average player. And then the more
technique and precision and skill that particular player acquires will allow them to play their flute quicker, faster, more aggressively, and with more technique. But that's all a matter of up to the player and how much they practice. So it's like, you know,
Right.
when I if I'm making flutes, every day. I've taken a break. I had a very successful year, so I took a break during December just to give time back to myself and relax a little bit. So I haven't been doing a lot of flute
Well
making this
deserved.
month. Yeah, I know. Very, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been nice. So I took a little bit of a break this December, but like when I'm making flutes, and um, it's like you're you're just surrounded by sound the whole time. So like you're you get so deeply immersed in just hearing the slight subtlety and the slight microns between like if a note is just a hair flat versus like two or three hairs flat, and then
Wow.
how you know how meticulous are you like to get to a point where you go, okay, like is this obsessive and is it excessive, or is it needs to be done because this is the sign of quality, like, and
Right.
there's a really interesting dance and the balance needs to be struck there. And I like that particular part of flute making. I really do. I think that I mean, of course, like the instrument in general has just made me a much more grateful and present and patient person in general. I think that's the main medicine, the main metaphor and medicine that flutes teach is patience. And
Mm.
they make you slow the fuck down. They make you chill out. They make you reflect. They make you talk to yourself. They make you ask the hard questions to yourself. They make you address the things that you're not willing to look at in the mirror. They do all these things for you. And most instruments do, I'd say, they do the same thing. Um, but I think the caveat with wind instruments and flutes in general is that the um, since you're using the life force, since you're using breath, and
Yes.
to actually make the tone, and you're not breathing secondary. Like a drummer's breathing secondary, a guitarist is breathing secondary. All these secondary forms of instrumentation, since you're forced to only use your breath, it makes you focus that much more, and it blocks everything else out. And I think that there's something to be said about that, where it's it it the aspect of. Oh, thank you, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a really cool part of the process too, where it makes you kind of like you can get a little in your head and very analytical about it, but like it makes so much sense at the end of the day that you're like, yeah, like it's uh they're quite the force to be reckoned with. They, when I like perform
Hmm.
somewhere, and I try to be, there's good things and bad things about like understanding our own ego and things like that, and being humble and understanding like
Yeah.
your aspects of like what talent you have and how to showcase yourself. And but when I play out, like the moment with I'm with Eric playing a gig, or I'm doing a solo show at like some the moment that I start playing my flutes, people just stop talking, and like there's something to be said about the power and the magic that they have within them. And it really matters about the intention. Like you could be having a bad day, and you know you might not be pushing the right prayers and the right intentions and the right thoughts into your instrument. It doesn't matter if it's a flute, but like
Right.
that's the thing. You got like everything is that getting a little bit more philosophical and existential
Yeah,
about
let's
it.
go there.
Like that's some of the stuff that I've really been. Um, it's always been that's in my wheelhouse. Like I definitely think that if you're having a bad day, um, and you're not playing from a place of neutrality, that's going to affect you, and it's going to affect the other people that are receiving the vibrations that you're actually putting out through your body as well as.
100%.
So it's really
Hmm.
tricky. It's a
Yeah.
tricky, it's a delicate dance. And so I think that flutes are really good to. They're like a cleansing device. Like they allow you to purge what isn't working for you at that moment or for that day or whatever you've like been storing up inside of you. They allow you to purge it, and then once it's purged and your vessel is clean, then you can then bring the right energy to the mix and then deeply affect whoever is listening, not just yourself. So it's the door swings both ways. It's I'm sure y'all have gigged in the past when you're just like you're playing a show with your buddies, and then um, since the door swings both ways, it's like the audience or the people that are there, they're giving back to you.
Yeah.
They're receiving, but they're also giving back, whether it's in their head, it's in their heart. They're repeating, they might be saying good things to you in their head, but they're not speaking them out loud. And then that back and forth of like that, you can, as a musician, you can feel it. Like, we're being, musicians, you're a catalyst, you're a conduit, you're open, you're
Yeah.
sending and receiving at the same time. We're very sensitive people. So because
Yes.
we're that sensitive, that is a very interesting part of the equation where when you've had a good gig and the audience is psychically sending you all the right thoughts. They're like, oh, I love
Yes.
you, like nice drum solo, but they hadn't said it. They said it in their heads, but they didn't say it to you,
Right.
and you can feel it, and they're lifting you up. And then sometimes you go on autopilot and you're just like, oh shit, like you get done with your song, and you're like, did we just do that? Like, that sounded the best we've ever done it. Or like, and these things happen. And a lot of the times it's because it's not just your own proficiency and skill and talent in the department. It's because the the other people that are there have their own role to play. The active listener has their own role in the aspect of musicianship and frequencies and
Yes.
medicine and music as a medicine.
Absolutely.
So it's a fascinating
Hmm.
part because, like, uh, I get, I love that back and forth when I'm playing with my friends, and then all of a sudden, like, you can feel that the people in the audience are really, really digging it, or you can tell when they're not digging it because then you might get a little self-conscious and then you fumble up on a phrase or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like it happens so quickly that we think it's our fault, but sometimes it's not our fault, and it's like
Cross
there's
pollination.
there's some great stuff
Yeah.
going on there,
You
and
feeding each other. Man, it's like a silent conversation, or at least on our side it's not silent, but yes, playing live is a totally different experience. It's I mean, it really is. It really is an interaction between the audience and us.
yeah, it's it's one of my favorite things to do. Like when when I'm like when I'm feeling more extroverted and like I'm ready to like share myself with random strangers, like, and I'm happy to do the gig, and you know all that stuff. It's always great, regardless of if it was well received or not. Like when I'm in the mood to be extroverted and be in public and do stuff, I'm choosing to be there, and so that's where a lot of the time, I'm definitely a little bit more, hermit, like hermity away, like just fluting away in the garage, like, just getting covered in sawdust and like keeping to myself and just like being super introverted all the time. And so, this is fun because like this sort of thing too, like I get to exercise my extroverted qualities by talking to people. So it's like, there's everything has its place, and
Mhm.
it's it's cool. What other videos you got lined up in that queue?
Well, you sent them to me.
By the
Um,
way, guys, if you haven't gone to Kyle's channel, The Flute Wizard, and subscribe, please go and support him and his work by doing that. Please, please,
Yeah, thanks.
Please,
please.
That'd be
please,
great. I
please.
appreciate
Yeah.
that.
And after the video, I have the ultimate question.
Yeah, sweet. More
Ah,
Be
questions.
the
prepared.
ultimate question.
More questions are good.
Da-da-da.
So that is a
Okay.
drone. That's a walking stick flute made out of bamboo. So that's a drone staff. There's there's it's one bamboo pipe, but there's multiple sections where I was able to make two separate flutes, and that's also the C and F, so perfect fourth, but in the minor pentatonic scale. It's a pretty fun little drone staff. That's all. It's a great companion to take in the woods. Like I put a rubber stopper on the bottom, and you can just walk with a nice staff, and then you got music on the go. It's a great thing.
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
Love that.
everybody needs a walking stick flute. I highly recommend walking stick flutes.
It's the real magic staff.
Yeah, super Gandalf. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, perfect fourth and perfect fifth are really fun to noodle around in. That was super cheesy right here.
I love that. Martial arts. Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
super cheese. A
Cool
really cheesy ending.
beans.
My favorite part about that video is the crows.
Hmm.
They were just like doing their little thing like at the right perfect time, and I was like, yeah, those crows like totally made my video even better. I made a handful of those drone staffs. They're a lot of fun. They go pretty quickly, and most of them are like people will see the video and it won't be available anymore because it's old or whatever, and then they'll be like custom order a
How
lot
do
of the
you
time.
get the drone
Sounds
to
great.
work in one pipe?
It's actually a lot easier than you would think. So you get a good bamboo staff, at least 60 inches length, and then you just look at the nodes because all the nodes on the bamboo are solid
Oh,
until you slam through them with
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Okay.
So every time you see a node on bamboo where it's like section hollow, and then the nodes themselves have a wafer thin piece of bamboo material in there that is solid and airtight. And uh, Scott, I got one or two friends of mine that keep on telling me that I should do uh, soundtracks for film, which I really I've done a stop motion. I've done a
Ooh,
stop motion film that's coming out soon, or at least I was featured in one with another musician. And then
awesome.
my flute playing actually recently got into. There is a stage, a live theater, like our audience participation thing that debuted in England that also is coming to the States from efficiently licensed by Dungeons and Dragons from Hasbro. and
Wow.
it's called the 20-Sided Tavern, and my flute playing is featured in the uh, not during the actual show, but during the like a bunch of people like basically it's the people that go to the show, they get divided into groups, and then that group is your party, and then you have to do the live theater. It's kind of like an escape room, but it's actually Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like live theater, and it's like very involved. It's
That's
probably
so
like probably
cool.
2 or 3 hours long. And
Yes.
my so during the meeting room where everybody's mingling and getting to know each other before the actual theater like starts, there's a lot of background music that's playing on repeat, and my flute playing is in that.
Awesome.
So
Wow.
I've had like two fun things happen to me over the past like year and a half, 2 years, that were like what I would consider actual real scoring gigs, which I'm very, very, very proud of and happy about. But
Should be.
I want more.
Well,
but
careful what you ask for,
I
because
know.
I find that
So
a
what
lot of
is
people don't know that, like in film composition, how often you actually have to make some music that you really don't want to make,
Yeah.
or the vision from the director is, I want you to do this here, and you're like, that's gonna sound like shit. And sometimes you end up composing a score that you just don't want people to see, because you don't want them to see the film or hear that score, because it's like, I mean, he made me do stuff that it just sounds like bad, and
Yeah.
you just don't
hold
want
out
to.
for artistic integrity?
I mean, everyone thinks
Yeah.
that, oh man, you're just gonna get this gig for a movie, and the visions are
Yeah,
gonna
not
line
all
up,
about the
and
money.
everything's gonna
Yeah.
go great and
Yeah.
stuff. And it's like there's times where I had to put music to something where it's like, but this, and it's like, it's like, I don't want to do that. Doesn't sound good there.
I was fortunate enough with these two projects that I had uh, the production team, and where everything all the production stuff was like they were very small, and so it was like
Yeah, that's the
they
best type.
they gave the few musicians that were in on the projects like enough creative freedom, and then they'd be like, really love what you did here, can you give us more, or like in this part can you give us less? Like it was like that sort of thing where it's like, oh, like I got to
Great.
basically do what I wanted, and then you just want me to be a little bit more minimalist here, or like try a different phrase here. It was like definitely had a lot of creative license with these two projects, so I was very, very grateful that they were my first two experiences where they didn't suck. But I can completely understand if you get a handful of these opportunities, and then the production manager or the sound designer is like, basically just micromanaging the shit out of you, and
Right.
you don't get to do what you're really like talented to
Takes the
about doing.
spirit out of it.
Exactly,
Or
Yeah.
exactly, dude, exactly.
Yeah, it
or
takes the
other
Yeah.
things
spirit.
that I've encountered where it's like, I got to put in some music that I felt was really good, and then in the editing process, I go to the screening, and you know, it's just not there anymore.
Yeah.
It's like sections are taken out and things like that. Or one time there was a mistake in the dialogue, and it's like, oh man, now I have my music on this film where there literally is a section where you don't hear the person's voice, and their mouth is moving, and it's like, oh my God.
Gotta phone in that the what's it
Yeah.
called, the AD. You gotta phone in the AD. The
Yeah, the
AD.
ADR. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Oh man.
So
the
how
the
did
the
you?
thing is that the trick is to know when to say no to something.
Yeah.
And
Well said. Well
yeah,
said.
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
definitely indie stuff is the best stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Luckily, I mean, I didn't expect the second project with Dungeons and Dragons to actually get officially like licensed and picked up by Hasbro. Like that was a big fucking deal. So,
yeah.
like
yeah.
that was like it was a small theater production, and then Hasbro got involved and was like, if you're gonna, they're like, we're gonna sponsor this if you want to use our D&D name and this and that. And then it was like, then it got elevated to a whole nother plateau where I had to sign a fucking NDA and all these things. I was like,
Oh
whoa.
yeah.
I was like,
Whoa.
this is new territory for me, brand new territory. What were you gonna say? You've had a question, Mike?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, there's got to be a story. We haven't got to this yet.
Yeah,
You are the Flute Wizard.
yeah.
Where Where did
Gotcha.
that come from?
Okay.
How did you become the Flute Wizard?
Well, like all of my close friends and my various circles on the East Coast or the West, like I only have a few friends out here. But like my other friends on the East Coast that I grew up with, um, we've always like been um, always been into fantasy stuff, like whether it's like, you know,
Awesome.
everything fantasy from like video games to like Zelda, Lord of the Rings, like,
Yes.
Star Wars, you name it. So it's like all the
Awesome.
stuff that deals with like, you know, just general aspects of like, I mean, who doesn't think wizards are cool? It's like a wizard's one of the coolest things out there. So I always like, thought of myself like as one, even though like I never put it out there. I was never like with the ego being like, oh, I'm a wizard. Like I never was like that. Like I internally thought it, but I never like was pushing it down people's throats.
Right.
And so that's the start where it's kind of like I've always had been enamored with wizards. Like as a little kid, like they're just the coolest, like why not? And
They
like,
are the
Oh,
yeah, they're just
coolest
the coolest.
for
And
sure.
yeah, and witches too, like witches and wizards and like all that stuff. Like I thought it was rad. And all the mystics, the mythical beings, like the mystics in Dark Crystal, like they're shamans. They're like weird shaman
Yes.
guys. So it's like all of that. This is the stuff that I was talking about, like at the beginning, like all the cultural immersion and the ethnomusicological like principles within the work that I do, it just all started to like layer on top of itself. And it's like, well, I care a lot about shamanism across various cultures. I think it's all very, very important stuff. Like
hmm
as humans, we've lost touch with the natural world, and that sucks.
Yeah.
And
right.
it's like
Yeah.
the reason I make flutes and the reason I make stuff out of sticks and stones is because that's my way of like connecting to the source, connecting to the everything that was before us.
Right.
And
Right.
Well,
so,
and before that,
yeah,
I
exactly,
believe that we
exactly,
were created, and
yeah.
this realm we live in is a bad copy of the real thing.
so, so through all those, like the imagination of and the freedom and the innocence of childhood imagination and the desire to just explore and say, oh, like the land of make believe is equally as important as like the real world, and what's the real distinction between the two. And I think later on down the line, I in college had I have a friend that drew. I was at the open mic and I had a friend and they like to draw, and I was probably 17, 18, and I asked my friend to draw me um, as a wizard, like holding a staff, you know, with a crystal on it, and a nice yellow robe with like the Triforces on it from Zelda, and like this very specific piece of like fan art. I was like, draw me like this, please. And they drew me as that. And then I kept it. It's on my wall. Like I have the original one. It's in colored pencil. It's a beautiful piece. It's framed. And that I just held on to it. And I just loved it as a memento, whatever. Like it was just like a one off. Please draw me as this. You're a good artist. I like to see, what you can do on paper. And so I held on to it forever. And when I was starting to like maybe post on Instagram before I was really more dedicated to my YouTube instead, because a lot of the people on Instagram, like, you might get a lot of comments like, but people are just window shopping. You rarely get a DM that's like, I want that exact thing. Can I buy it right now? That doesn't happen as often as you would think. Um, so when I was doing Instagram, I started to call myself Kyle's Crafts. And it was like Kyle's Crafts, and crafts was spelled with a K. And I thought that the alliteration and everything was cool. And I thought it was simple. And then I had a little website, and I started off with just like selling my maybe my beadwork or um, my macrame or dream catchers, or I would make like pipes out of antler and wood, or any of the natural other art that I can make with my hands. Little bits of woodworking here and there. So I started calling myself Kyle's Crafts, and then my flute business started to really take off. And I like it was my friend, one of my best friends on the East Coast. His name is Jesse, and he's a very successful entrepreneur. And he's like he's a year younger than me. He's 39. Well, he's 39 this year, but I'll be 40. No, he's 38. I'll be 40 next November. And so he I his brother got married, and his brother lives out here, but he lives in South Carolina with his 3 kids and his wife. And I've been very close to his family since we were 13, 14 years old, the whole family. And we basically grew up with each other, like doing stupid shit, from high school onward, like getting into trouble. And, um, we played a lot of music with each other. We made a lot of like good music as high schoolers, like just experimenting and getting into that whole improv thing. So the end of the story is like I met his brother got married a couple. His brother got married a couple of years out here. It was like right. It was right after. It was right after the pandemic when people started to like feel like they could just go out again or whatever. Like I was a little bit more I was just doing what I just did whatever the fuck I wanted. Like I wasn't subscribing to the whole
Yeah,
fucking
that's what
thing.
we did.
That's
Yeah.
what we did too.
I was like, I thought that shit was getting a little weird, and the powers that be were playing a little too close to home with uh, making the public do things, and so I just,
Yeah,
we
we
agree
agree
with you,
totally.
Kyle. Yeah.
We
I basically,
moved to North Florida and left Miami because of that.
yeah. So
We
like,
didn't flee a virus, we
yeah.
fled tyranny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like, there, and then the collective consciousness of like your peers and everybody like shunning you if you like
Yeah.
didn't follow the herd. And
Yeah.
that hive mind type mentality is not, I don't operate like I freed my fucking mind when I was like 13, 14 years old.
Awesome.
So like, it was like when this shit started happening, and like, if you've taken a decent amount of hallucinogens in your life, you're like, this is kind of stupid. People are being a little weird right now. So, and even if you have,
Awesome.
even if you haven't, and you're just like an intelligent human being, and you can critically think, that shit was getting weird. So,
Or if you
Exactly
had
right.
8th grade biology.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. In the general science things too. So like, the family got together. They all came out from the East Coast to like, he had the wedding out here, and everybody got together. It was a big party, and I hadn't seen my buddy Jesse in like since he got married, like years and years ago. And we were talking, and we were chatting, and he's like, man, you haven't stopped doing this, have you? He's like, you just like, you stopped doing the restaurant stuff, and you just have devoted yourself to the flute making process. And like, he's like, I've been watching your growth. Like, he's like, each year you're producing like higher quality instruments, like like everything is just exponentially getting better and better. He's like, how much are you making? Like, how much are you selling? Like, what are your pieces going for? And so then like I just leveled with him. I was like, well, like I can fetch this much to this much now. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he's very, very good at marketing and business, and his whole family is. So we're just chatting. I think we were like sharing a spliff or something like that. And like he just he just he pulls me aside and he goes, dude, he's like, this Kyle's crafts thing is not cutting it, bro. He's like, you need to brand yourself. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're the fucking wizard, bro. He's like, you're the flute wizard. Like, he's like, just fucking. He said, just fucking own it. He's like, just own it, man. He's like, it's like, he basically said, what do you got to lose? And I was like, you know what? Like, you're right. And
You're
then
right.
it all fucking just lined up, and it was like, oh. And then I got the chills now just thinking about it. Where it's like, I already set the stages for it, like way back in
Years
college.
ago. Yeah.
And my friend drew my foresight. Like that was the trippy part. Like I knew before I even knew. So it
Yep.
was that is the story. Like I knew before I even knew, and then my friend was a catalyst. She brought it to the surface on paper with the artwork, and then my friend constantly reminded me of like, what the fuck are you doing, bro? Like it's right here. It's right in front of your face. Like it's right here. And then basically I had to just like swallow the cheesiness of it at first. And then it was like, okay, like, and then he's like, but go further. He's like, you can use the image. You already got the image. You've got a logo. You've got branding. He's like, but you got to go further. He's like, get yourself a fucking robe. Get yourself a hat.
Awesome.
He's like, he
I
basically,
love that.
he said, go big or go home. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And so, he's one of my good, he's a great friend of mine. And like,
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
he basically told me all the things that like I didn't want to hear. And then he said it in a way where I was like, you know what? I was like, I got to get out of my own way. You're right. And so once I realized that I got out of my own way and I totally embodied it, and I was like, I'm just going to be this fucking thing.
Yeah.
And then everything changed immediately, instantaneously. Sales went up, viewership went up, like clout and notoriety and this and that and all this shit went up. And that's the story. It was just like a friend pulled me aside and told me some things that I was kind of, struggling with. And he just shoved it down my throat. He was like, dude, if you don't do this, you're doing yourself a disservice. And I was like, okay. And then I listened to him and he was fucking right. And it was like, I just am so grateful that he pushed me, cause I don't like to be pushed. I'm very fixed, and so I'm very stubborn. I'm a stubborn person. And so, but to a fault, like to a serious fault, like I'm very wise-ish with my stubbornness. So, but he really pushed me out of my comfort zone and was like, dude, you got to. And he's like, it's going to make the world of a difference down the line. And now that I understand the aspect of like, yeah, if you have an image, if you have a brand, if you stick with it, like it actually can do a lot of good wonders for you. And I am very, very grateful about that particular aspect to the story of how I, chose to be this, or I'm naturally this, but I just didn't believe it enough, or I didn't own it enough. And now it's like, now I don't even think about it anymore because like, it's just like, it took that initial like catalyst of being like, he was like, trust, that the Asmod like, trust me, and that's one of those things where when somebody says, trust me, you're always just like, they could be absolutely right. And you're just an idiot because you didn't listen, or they could, you could still just be really timid or shy around the concept or the idea. And I just needed a little extra push. And then it was the best decision I could have ever done for just like, I don't know, distinguishing myself amongst the masses. Like,
Yes.
because like there's a shitload of flute makers out there. We are a very niche breed of people. Like there's not a ton of us, but there is a lot of us. If you've been in the field for a while and you do your research and you follow people and you watch the growth of people and you study other musicians and you study other makers. Guitarists do it with each other, and like, it's like there's when you get yourself to a point where like I don't know, like I'm at a point now where I just like to make things still.
Make
And like
things,
I don't let any of the other like weird subtleties to the process get in the way. I mean, running a business is hard. Like I've had to wear so many hats that I didn't even realize I was going to have to put on. Like little bits of graphic design, like understanding how to make a thumbnail well, all the clerical that goes into running your website or even your digital marketplace, like, and then
keeping it updated.
Yeah, keeping it updated, customer service, making sure that I'm making content as much as I'm pushing the content, or I'm putting the content on the website as well as coupling it with a video on the YouTube. Like, and then
then the hard part is then also dealing with all the laws and regulations, even probably for what you have. It's like it's still, it's like every like 3 months you gotta check in with sales and use, and you keep updating that. And then there's these things where my wife started an LLC and she dissolved it after a bit, in favor of just keeping it a sole proprietorships, because the LLC stuff was just
It's too expensive to maintain.
Well, yeah, like every year you have to pay a certain amount of money just to confirm that your address hasn't changed.
Yeah,
It's like, what the hell?
I thought, yeah, but in any case, Kyle,
Yeah.
it was Mike who introduced me to your work and to your channel, but it was the wizard costume. That's like, you know what? This is a really talented guy, but he's humble enough. You know, he's just having fun here, and it's like I subbed right away. It's like this is a guy. He's humble, he's talented, but he's not one of these guys who has an inflated head. I'm gonna follow this guy, and I like wizards. Okay,
Thank you. I gotta owe all that one to Jesse for sure. He really did light the fire under my ass to like be like, yo, dude, just own this shit. Like, have fun with it. He basically said, have fun with it. He's like, people are gonna make fun of you. Don't worry about it. And he's like, this and
yeah,
that. And like, of course, like I
ignore those
agree with you
people.
there. Like, if you notice, it was like, it's like I take my work and my craft seriously, but
Yes.
if you can at the same time, I realize that if I can wear the wizard costume, I don't have to take myself so seriously. And then it's
No,
like
yeah.
there's that balance there where it's like, you know, the skill and the performance should be at least noticeable or evident. But if I have a costume on, it's not as like there's something else there. And so I
Well,
think
the skill you have speaks for itself. We see it in your videos.
thanks.
The thing is, with the wizard costume, you're like, I'm approachable. You can talk to me. You could ask me questions.
Yeah.
And whether people are aware of that when, conscious of that when they see you in the videos, it's just the humility comes through,
Yeah.
and you know that, okay, if I buy a product from this person, I can get help, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah.
And so that's why your business is exploding, because of your humility. And
Thank you.
so the
That means a lot to
avatar.
me. Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Oh no, and the
Sometimes
avatar
you
for
just
your
got to get out
channel.
of your own way.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you've seen enough of my videos, I tend to get silly sometimes too.
Oh,
And you're just
I've enjoyed some of your interesting editing choices for sure.
yeah. So, yeah, well, who puts a clown nose on and a hat and plays a flute? You know, it's
Oh, that was a good one.
No,
I
Oh,
did
yeah.
some
It's
those
just
nice.
tie-dye
I did
pants
like
were the worst
I
thing.
did like I liked all that. That was good.
but
That
sometimes
made
you
me
just got to
chuckle.
laugh at yourself
Yeah, and
and get out of your way.
Yeah.
more so than not for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
a good humbling lesson for sure. I think
sometimes people take, and I agree with you. I mean, I take what I do serious, but you have to kind of step aside from that sometimes, because people might be, well, that's a serious instrument. What is he doing wearing a clown nose? And it's like, you know,
No.
and I've known, I've known a fair amount of native elders throughout the years, and one of the things I found was totally not the stereotype. Most of them I've
Yeah.
ever met had a hell of a sense of humor,
yeah.
Mm.
and so and they knew how to mesh that in a respectable way with what they were doing, and when it was time to put that aside. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we take ourselves too well. Not we, but in general, human beings take themselves really too seriously, and especially in the world we
except when
were
they
in.
need to.
Well, especially
Yeah.
in the world we were in, academia, it's like, and when you're around some people that are just so so proud of themselves that, oh, nobody knows who I am because I'm a real artist, and it's like,
Hmm.
But
and it's like,
it's
well, I
become
could
I've
a
met
console
I've met
myself that way. It's
I've
just
met
nobody knows.
so many people, like a mix of everything from one side of the spectrum to the other of like kind of what you're referring to. I've met a lot of people, and there's uh everybody handles this particular like framework like slightly differently, I guess, but it's weird. Like if you I guess that it's like if you told me that where I'd be right now when I was like, just 17, 18, 19, like just fresh going into college, be like, yo, like by the time you're close to 40, you're going to be like this. And I'm going to be like, and I would have fucking just laughed in your face. I would have been like, no way, no way.
And like it would have been really weird. Like, and it's crazy. Like, I I think one of the things, like, to go back on what you're saying with the taking seriously thing too, is that um, I felt over the many years now that like people aren't really taking the time to give themselves like the proper pat on the back as often as they deserve. Like sometimes, it takes other people to give you words of affirmation if like that's part of your love language or whatever. But like as individuals, I think one of the things that I struggled with over the years is to not give myself enough credit and or pat myself on the back and tell myself that
Mhm.
I've done a good job as often as I should have. And you know, the aspect of speaking negatively to yourself and like beating down on yourself if you're like not at the level that you want to be at, or like the aspects of envy and jealousy come into play when
Yeah.
you're in a field, like especially an artistic field,
Yes.
where you're doing this compare and contrast thing with like the other people in your field. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
that is a vicious and nasty road to go down.
It
And
is.
it is
Yeah.
super gross and it's very toxic to your spirit, and no one is immune to it. I don't care how solid of a person you are.
Right.
No one is immune to that shit. And
Mhm.
that all deals with the ego and stuff too. But what I've realized is that over the years, when I started to see my my return on investment of like, okay, like now I'm not 5 years in, now I'm 10 years in. Oh shit, now I'm 15, 16 years in. And what is it now? 2009, like 24. Yeah, so like I'm 15 plus years in now. And so not only do I have the years, but I've got the, it's like just to have to internalize like the hours of mastering ship of like the 10,000 plus, whatever that whole thing is. I've got that, and then I've got like I mean, internationally renowned in like 45 plus countries. Like my flutes are actually like all over the world now, like close to
Awesome.
50 countries, and
Wow.
like, and that's only from 2017 to now.
Wow.
So it's
Hmm.
like I had to start looking at these bullet points and being like, oh shit, like when did it go from here to here to here? And like, have I just been on autopilot the whole time? Or like, am I also like at least self aware and happy enough to like recognize my growth and to be happy about my achievements, and then to give myself like the to give myself the permission to be like proud of
Yes.
myself.
Yes.
Like there's so much there, and it's and we're so fragile and we're such emotional beings
Mhm.
that like we forget sometimes to like really just generally be happy and proud of our growth and our forward movement, and like staying the course, and like not letting anybody fuck with you or get in your way, like all the naysayers and shit. Like there's plenty of
Yeah.
people out there that are psychic vampires that are just gonna want to like
Yes.
Yeah.
that are gonna want to poo
Well,
poo on your good time.
100%.
that's
You know?
Yeah.
that's what I mean. I got knocked out of academia, and part of it, I guess, really what ended it is when we moved from Miami to up here, and now we're just trying to make it on our own, doing other stuff and whatever we can, and growing our music and things on the side. And I know it's going to take a while, and it's like, well, I
Yeah.
left it a little bit late
Well, what you
because I was
learned,
trying to play the game for
yeah.
too many years,
Yeah.
and it was a game that was already stacked against me
Same
because there's so
here.
much politics in
Yeah.
academia that it's ridiculous that you know now it's like man, I wish I would have started earlier.
What
I
you
mean, I was
learned,
always
yeah.
just doing it on the side, I was always doing what I wanted to do on the side, and then just teach and stuff, was the main thing. And now we have nothing else we can do except
I think one
Well,
of the
be ourselves.
what Kyle, I think what you learned before Lawrence and I did, because we're both over 40 and you're not there yet, but what you learned early and we didn't is that you you found a way to not let other people define what success is for you. You've defined your own success, and
Yep.
when when I learned how to let go, and when Lawrence learned how to let go, we found our freedom, and it's now that we're trying to get where you're at, building our own success. That's what we're trying to do. And to me, you are an inspiration for having done this and built your own success. So it's just amazing having you here. I'm so glad that Mike connected us.
Yeah, I'm very very grateful for the chance to chat with all of you. It's a real treat. It's very it's very affirming, and it's therapeutic. It's cathartic. It's
Well,
affirming.
we
It's
also
all
have to
sorts of
stay
things.
humble because
Yeah.
there's only 3 watching right now.
Oh, well,
Well,
we're
either
going.
way, we just had like a fun little like a group chat. It's a
Oh,
group chat.
we're gonna have a bunch of people in the replay because this is so relevant to a lot of
Yeah.
our audience who are also artists, and a lot of
Right.
our audience
Yeah.
also, Lawrence, to be fair, are in the UK and it's their sleepy time. So
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll be reaching across the ocean, so to speak.
yeah,
Nice. Yeah. I feel
Isn't
Yeah,
I feel
and plus we
technology?
went for 3 hours, so I
yeah.
think
This
some people in the United States are going to bed.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say something that ruined everything?
I don't think so.
your laughter just is
I don't
just
think
an
so.
interruption. How dare you? How dare
Okay.
you?
Thanks, Scott. Let me play one more flute then before
Yes,
we close out, right?
Yeah,
I think that would be
cool bean.
absolutely.
appropriate. All right, let's see here. Rama.
People now some type of musical collaboration must happen. It must.
Yeah, we should all we should all make a song together. Like just send files back and forth over the internet and like all of us work on our
Yeah.
audio,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah.
just our audio interfaces, just plug in like overdub and send it back, like simple stuff like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you
Super
go.
super cool, and then feature it on a future earworms.
Oh,
Good vibe.
let's like we did all there's some exotic keys and then but here we'll do here we'll do something classic. Six six hold um regular diatonic major. So a
Ooh.
major
Nice.
scale native style flute off of reclaimed wood as well. Not pine,
Mm-hmm.
something a little harder. Um but really nice really nice major scale. You can do all of the contemporary and like modern like stuff with it. Well, at least most of it.
Haha.
Nice and festive, right? Very
Oh,
festive.
Yeah.
Very
Oh,
nice.
festive.
Beautiful. Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's gonna be clipped.
Yeah, joy to. I mean, joy to the world is a banger. It's a good
yeah.
one.
Yes.
It's very it fits with the seasonal vibe, I guess. But the
Awesome.
major scale is great. You could do like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and like a lot of the classic and contemporary stuff can be done with the major diatonic, as long as you get some of the extra cross fingering sharps and flats in there and stuff. But that flute has like 1.5 octaves of range. It's a pretty good flute.
Hmm.
Um, Crisp.
That's what I said in like beginning of early music theory classes for students, like at the that a lot of times we'd have students that wanted to major in music and stuff, and at a junior college you're kind of like teaching students that don't even really have much of a background, they just want to do it, and so well, who's to say no? So you teach like fundamentals of theory, and pretty much you start off with like All right, what is a key? Well, you don't start with keys, but once you get to them, which is pretty soon, it's like, well, what's a key? Well, in most of the systems of music that we work with, there's about 7 notes at any given time that kind of work together.
Just
And so
get
you
those
just
mapped
start
out,
there.
and you should have a nice
It's a
foundation.
starting point.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep.
Well, that's what you need as a starting point. So,
Yeah.
which is
But
what's nice about the flute is you got the the pentatonic flutes, and a lot of people will cover up one of the holes, but yeah, people want to get all fancy, and like you said, they want the big flute or they want this, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna scare yourself off before you even start,
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
and
Happens so often.
yeah,
And
and you want to buy a good one,
yeah, it's
and
weird. It's
that's
weird.
and
It's the
and
hard
that's
part.
what I've always said. Your flutes are also affordable. I mean, you got some fancy ones and all that stuff too, but if somebody just needs a nice, decent sized pentatonic flute, you got
Yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
that's good
It's always
because you
been
could buy one
important.
for the same amount of money that might look fancier but sounds like shit.
That's the thing. It's always been an interesting part of the process to understand, like, okay, like, regardless of if I can make instruments in price bracket A and go all the way up to price bracket like, F, which is like massive amounts of money differential.
Right.
The high end, like museum worthy style pieces, like some of these drone flutes with all the inlay and all that shit. So it's like, you know, there's I've always wanted to make sure that the majority, if not like half of my current stock or half of the stuff that I choose to put out is accessible to the majority of the public, and that has always been a part of my business model where I wanted them to at least be within the ballpark range of like somebody might have to save up a little bit for one of these. Like everybody's like,
mm-hmm.
everybody's money is different. So somebody might have to save up for even like, a beginner, like, lower priced model of mine. But now things are getting really weird, where, I've noticed over the years, like lots and lots of different makers, regardless of, their skill or talent, and simple things like people like actively choosing to undercut the market, and or like people like doing other ways of making flutes, like um, there's some great stuff out there in hindsight. Like, um, there's a lot of 3D printed flutes now, that have,
Mm,
pretty solid sound quality. And there's some cool people out there that are making them, and offering them like at extremely, really low prices. And it's fascinating to see like the evolution of the market and the industry, just, as a constant maker and, as a player and a professional. But like that's one of the weirder parts about the process is like, you know, when you're analyzing like budgeting, and you're also like thinking about like when I make a flute, I'm only making one flute at a time. Like I give myself entirely to that one flute every single time I make it. So it's like all these flutes, all my bamboo flutes, regardless of what scale they're in, regardless of what size they're in, when I make that flute, I'm making that flute as if that flute is the only flute in the world. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the delicate dance and the part of the process that where it's like, okay, sometimes when I get a piece to a certain level, I have to do some sort of like uh I have to play a really weird balancing act with that, because if it's a flute, it's kind of this criteria. It's like, one, is it a flute that I have in my collection already? Do I have that flute in my personal collection that I play with, that I gig with, that I perform with? If I do, that the flute that I just made, if it's a duplicate, it goes out. It goes to the public. It's available.
right.
If I make a new flute that I don't have in my collection, that is a contender, and it's like, okay, maybe I need this. Maybe somebody's going to shoot me a song and be like, yo, I got this song in D major. You got a D major flute? I'd be like, okay, like I do. I have it now. But like, then if I sell it, I might not have it later. So it's like I have to play this constant like catch up game and upkeep with like you guys would love this. If I showed you the spreadsheet file of all the flutes that I've ever made, it's hilarious. Like, it's like the whole rainbow of like C, D, E, F, all the sharps and flats. It's all the notes on the downside, and then it's all the scales on the top side, and then it's me
Wow.
checking off boxes of if it's been done or not. And then if it's been done in every octave, so you can have an F5, you can have an F4, and you can have an
Wow.
F3. So it's like only certain flutes you can get to the contrabass level. Like you kind of stop at D. So it's like D and upward. Nobody does low contrabass Cs. Like it's just kind of impossible on the hands. But like, I have this ridiculous spreadsheet and it's hilarious because like it's showcased for me. It's like a reminder. It's like, oh, you already did that. Like you already did that. You sold that, and you have an extra copy of that that is yours that you keep. And so it's a lot. And it took me a while to get this organized and like kind of meticulous with the way that I can keep the flow going. So now when I look at the spreadsheet, I basically just look at the flutes that I haven't made yet, and then I make those flutes. And a lot of the times it's personal first. And if the flute is satisfactory for public consumption and I don't want to keep it as a personal flute, I'll let it go immediately. A lot of the times I might feel like I'm acting as like a medium or a conduit. So sometimes I'm making a flute and somebody out in the world is calling that flute in and I don't know, but I'm doing it. It's like I'm like kind of getting whisked up in the spell of it all. And then I've had a couple people email me here and there throughout the years being like, I'm buying this flute because I saw it in my dream. Like the people will say weird stuff to me like that from time to time, and I'll believe them. I'll just be like,
Awesome.
okay. I'm like, that flute's yours. Like, no problem. Like, so if like these things are happening every now and again, and it's kind of trippy and I like it, but it's sometimes I get like, sometimes I'll just be pulling information in from all around when I'm making and I'm creating and I'm crafting, because that's the aspect of creation. You're just using the life force to like, you're creating something from raw material. It's like you're birthing objects into existence. It's a very magical thing. And so it's that's one of the best and most rewarding parts of the process, is making sure that like I'm creating these tools, I'm creating these gifts, I'm creating these vessels that are going out into the world and they're affecting people deeply, and they're serving their divine purpose. I'm so grateful for all the opportunities I've had uh, to to mentor. I've taught handfuls and handfuls of people how to play as well as how to make flutes. So I'm spreading the gospel of the flute out there in the world in the best ways that I know how, by teaching, by mentoring, by doing consultation, um, by doing modifications and maintenance. I have people send me their flutes from other makers, and they're like, my flute's broke, or my flute's not playing as well as it used to. Can you take a look at it? Or this, and like I'll mod people's stuff because I can diagnose if there's some weird little thing going on underneath the flue, in the windway with the fetish or the fipple, or like if it's got an air leak in it. I can do all these things now that like I didn't realize that it was going to become this involved, especially with then being able to use my talents for like actual, like the other aspects of musicianship, with like performing and gigging and getting hired to do stuff. And like that's a really awesome thing. So the multifaceted aspect of the business of music um, has it's just every year. I think this is something that I believe that all of you will resonate with, as well as most likely be active in, as well as every year. The main thing I try to do is just like my own like thing, um, that I encourage everyone to, is every year I just try to add um, every year I try to add one more thing onto my plate that I wasn't doing the previous year. So it's like I just make sure that whatever plateau I got to myself with the work ethic and like staying true to like, baseline, every year I put one new thing of a challenge on top of that.
and then I'm at that part next year, and then I go up here for the next year, and then so that's my way of operating. And I think it's really healthy for us to challenge ourselves. Of course, to know like to not get burnout, like don't overwork yourself,
Right.
and like
Right.
know when to take breaks and shit. Like I breathe in a lot of sawdust, and I get covered in a lot of sawdust, and like I know when to stop. Like when my arms hurt and I've been standing on my feet for 6, 7 hours at a time,
It's
like
time.
yeah, I need to
Yeah.
stop, and like then I'll take a day or two off, and it's just I think that's one of the things. It's being patient with ourselves, understanding the natural karmic pace of
Yeah.
things, like being like that's something that I've been slowly stepping into with a lot more like grace over the years, is just being more patient, but at the same time understanding that I don't need to go balls to the wall. I can really pace myself methodically and strategically and still get the same caliber of work done.
Right.
And like that's like one of the one main lessons that I've taken away over the past like 2 or 3 years, is like that sort of stuff. You know,
All
to
right.
not just overdo it. Just take it easy every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yes, and in fact, I think we're going to have to
Yeah,
now
sweet.
because
So good.
Mike needs to get to bed.
All right.
I need
Well,
to finish a few things before bed.
hey,
And
thanks for this. This was a lot of
well,
fun.
thanks
I
for
really
being with
Thank
appreciate
us
it.
you for coming
because
on.
Thank
My
you so
pleasure.
much,
My
Kyle.
pleasure.
We have to bring you on again for sure.
Oh,
Would
sure.
you be up for that?
Absolutely. No problem.
Oh, great.
Nice.
It's
Great.
very easy. It's very easy to just kind of talk with all of y'all. So like, yeah,
yeah.
I'm happy to. I would love it. So just keep me posted on in
Well, it
2025
was
whenever you
our
want to.
pleasure. Oh, I got your email now, so we'll keep in touch. But we'll definitely have to exchange some musical ideas.
Yeah, for
When
sure.
something jumps out at me, I'll send it to you. And
And for everybody that watched, besides all of our commentary this evening and the hosts, like for everybody that watched, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And this was just a delight, an absolute delight. So I'm super super happy. Big success, a lot of fun. Thanks for giving me a chance to share
Absolutely.
myself with all of you.
Did
all
you have something
right.
you
Yeah.
wanted to share before we sign off?
I mean, I think you posted all my socials. We watched a lot of videos. I
It's
played
all in
some
the
flutes.
description.
I
Anyone
think
watching after the
Yeah.
fact, it's
I
in the
I
description.
think I think this pod knocked it out of the park as far as I'm
All
concerned.
right. Good
I'm feeling
deal.
pretty
Okay.
good. Happy
That's
happy holidays and blessings from the Flute Wizard.
awesome.
May the
Love
flute
that.
may the flute be with you. That's
There
what
Yes.
I'll
you
say.
go. There you go.
Awesome.
Well,
I'm sorry I didn't wear my wizard hat today, but it wouldn't have fit with my
It wouldn't
headphones.
have fit in the frame. Next time, next time.
Yeah, next
yeah,
time.
there you go.
Cool
There you go.
beans.
Well,
Yeah.
happy holidays to you, my friend, as
Yeah.
well.
Peace and love to all of y'all. I really appreciate this. This was a lot
Absolutely.
of fun.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, folks. Next week, it's the freaking Star Wars holiday special. So,
Yes.
the
Wow.
week.
Yes,
That,
I know, right?
that's a gem right there.
Oh
Woo.
yeah.
That's a gem.
A dark gem.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense.
It's a rite of passage
Yeah, I guess.
that
Yeah.
people have to go through.
Mike hasn't seen it, that's why.
Oh,
Well, I watched about 15 minutes. That's about all I can handle.
Oh,
it's
Mike.
it's utterly cringeworthy. It's so great.
I'll try to I'll try to finish it between now and next week.
It's cringe-tacular.
Well,
It
we're
is.
not going to see the
Perfect
whole
word
thing.
for
We're
it.
just going to do
Yeah.
some slides, some clips, and we'll see how far we get. It's definitely not going to stretch to 2 weeks.
Ah.
All right, folks. So, good night. Thank you, Scott, for staying with us till the
Yeah.
end.
Thanks,
Yes,
Scott.
Scott,
You
thanks
deserve
so
your
much
trophy.
for the
Oh, excuse
links.
me. Absolutely.
Here we
That's the
go.
man.
This is how we close it. Oops.
8:56. We are now leaving the air.